gifted them some cleats. Some warm, some didn't, but I was like, okay, this is just my little appreciation gift to them. Because they don't be having a lot in stock.
That was Shedeur Sanders casually flexing that his custom Nike cleats sold out. And it turns out the hype was real. Nike's now eyeing a record-breaking extension that could make him the highest paid rookie endorser ever. But while his jersey sales are exploding, not everyone in the league is happy about it. Let's break it down. The unprecedented sales phenomenon. Breaking news is emerging from inside sources that Nike is actively pursuing a massive contract extension, with Shedeur Sanders following unprecedented rookie jersey sales that have left the entire NFL establishment stunned. The sportswear giant is reportedly so impressed by the financial windfall generated by their fifth-round quarterback investment that they're preparing to offer him a deal that could rewrite the economics of athlete endorsements forever. But here's what's driving this shocking development. When the dust settled after Sanders' preseason debut against the Carolina Panthers, something extraordinary happened that sent shockwaves through the entire National Football League. The jersey sales figures that emerged were nothing short of staggering. $250 million in rookie jersey sales, making Sanders the highest-selling rookie jersey since his father, Deion Primetime Sanders, dominated the league decades ago.
$250 million in rookie jersey sales for Shedeur Sanders, which means he's going to commission $14 million. He only made $4.6 million from his rookie contract. So he's already made more than most second, third, whatever round.
To understand the sheer magnitude of these numbers, consider that most NFL rookies struggle to sell even a fraction of this amount in their entire first season. Sanders accomplished this astronomical figure within weeks of his debut, fundamentally challenging every assumption about rookie marketability and fan engagement in professional sports.
This is a sign for anybody out there that feels like they've been done wrong. You are always going to end up on the right side if you are a good person. Shedeur has been doing nothing but keeping quiet, working, minding his business, driving the speed limit hopefully, and doing everything he needs to do to prepare for this upcoming season.
But here's where this story becomes absolutely mind-blowing. Sanders isn't just making money from traditional rookie contract structures. Thanks to a revolutionary clause embedded in his deal, known as the Prime Equity Clause, Sanders receives a percentage of all revenue from merchandise, sponsorships, and promotions linked to his name and likeness. This means that from those $250 million in jersey sales alone, Sanders is set to pocket an estimated $14 million, more than triple his entire four-year rookie contract base salary of $4.6 million.
The clause is called Prime Equity. This clause gives Sanders a percentage of revenue generated from merchandise, sponsorships, and promotions linked to his name and likeness. That's what I said. It wasn't that his character was stupid. They was trying
He's
to
too smart.
Yeah, that's why he got picked so far back, because apparently his agents wanted this clause in the contract.
The financial sophistication displayed by Sanders and his representation represents a paradigm shift in how young athletes approach their professional careers. While most rookies focus solely on making the team and proving their worth on the field, Sanders arrived in the NFL with a comprehensive business strategy that treats his athletic career as one component of a broader entertainment and lifestyle brand. Think about the implications of that for a moment. While most fifth-round picks struggle to make their mark and earn their second contract, Sanders has already financially outperformed countless higher drafted players before even starting a regular season game. This isn't just about football anymore. This is about reshaping the entire economic landscape of how rookie athletes approach their professional careers. The relationship between Sanders and Nike represents something far more significant than your typical endorsement deal. This partnership began in August 2024 when Sanders became Nike's inaugural NIL football athlete, marking a historic moment where the swoosh brand invested in a college player with unprecedented confidence. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Sanders was coming off record-breaking seasons at Colorado, where he set school records for single-season passing yards, 4,134, and touchdowns, 37, in 2024. But Nike's investment wasn't just about college performance. They saw something deeper, a generational talent carrying the legacy of one of the most marketable athletes in sports history. The deal deliberately echoed his father Deion Sanders' iconic 1990s collaboration with Nike, which produced the wildly popular Air Diamond Turf DT sneakers, famous for their dual sport appeal in football and baseball. What makes this even more remarkable is how Nike positioned Sanders throughout the draft process. Despite projections as a top quarterback prospect, Sanders slipped to the 5th round, 144th overall, by the Cleveland Browns, a slide that many attributed to various factors including his unique contract demands. But Nike never wavered in their commitment. In April 2025, ahead of the draft, Nike went all in, breaking months of social media silence to promote Sanders exclusively. They flooded social media with posts showcasing Sanders in custom gear, including all-gray Nike Air DT Maxim 96 sneakers and matching Vapor Edge 360 DT cleats with captions like "Nothing left to do," "See you 4.24 inches," and "Poetry in motion." The strategic brilliance of Nike's approach becomes clear when you examine the numbers. Sanders' NEO valuation reached $6.5 million college, making him the top valued athlete according to On3 rankings. This valuation stemmed from deals with multiple brands including Gatorade, Beats by Dre, and Mercedes-Benz. But Nike remained the cornerstone partner. The jersey sales phenomenon didn't happen by accident. It was the culmination of months of strategic marketing, authentic storytelling, and most importantly, on-field performance that validated the investment. When Sanders stepped onto the field for his preseason debut against the Carolina Panthers, he delivered exactly what Nike had bet on, completing 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns, showcasing the poise and accuracy that had made him a college star. Within hours of that performance, Nike Football posted an ad on X with the caption "Only a matter of time," featuring Sanders' signature watch celebration. The ad garnered over 196,000 likes and thousands of reposts, demonstrating the kind of viral marketing momentum that money can't buy but authentic moments can create. But the most shocking aspect of this entire story isn't just the sales figures. It's what they represent for the future of professional sports. The prime equity clause in Sanders' contract grants him ownership of personal content across platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and Twitch, plus special media rights for behind-the-scenes footage, creating a blueprint that could fundamentally alter how athletes negotiate their value in professional sports.
The clause is called prime equity. This clause gives Sanders a percentage of revenue generated from merchandise, sponsorships, and promotions linked to his name and likeness. If he becomes like a superstar, he could be the richest NFL player ever.
The NFL has never seen anything quite like this before. Traditional rookie contracts follow a rigid structure designed to maintain league parity and owner control, but Sanders has essentially hacked the system by treating himself as a business partner rather than just an employee. The implications are staggering. If other rookies begin demanding similar clauses, it could completely reshape the economics of professional football. The Nike marketing machine and its revolutionary approach. The genius of Nike's marketing strategy for Shedeur Sanders goes far beyond traditional athlete endorsements. It represents a masterclass in brand building that has left the entire sports marketing industry scrambling to understand how they achieved such unprecedented results with a fifth-round rookie. Nike's approach to Sanders represents a strategic evolution in athlete endorsements, particularly in the NIL era, where college stars transition seamlessly into professional icons. The company crafted a multifaceted campaign that intertwines digital agility, product innovation, and narrative storytelling to elevate Sanders' profile in ways that traditional marketing simply cannot achieve. The foundation of this revolutionary partnership traces back to Sanders' announcement of his NIL deal via a joint Instagram post with Nike, which highlighted their commitment to apparel and footwear collaborations. The agreement deliberately echoed his father Deion Sanders' long-standing relationship with the brand, which produced the legendary Nike Air DT Max 96 sneakers, now reimagined in colorways worn by Shedeur during key events like Pro Days. This familial connection adds layers of authenticity and nostalgia that appeal to both young fans discovering the brand and veteran sneaker enthusiasts who remember the original primetime era. But Nike's real stroke of genius came in their pre-draft promotional blitz. While most brands would wait to see where a player gets drafted before committing marketing resources, Nike took the opposite approach. They flooded social media with posts showcasing Sanders in custom gear, such as all-gray Nike Air, DT Max 96 sneakers, and matching Vapor Edge 360 DT cleats, emphasizing his style and performance with motivational captions that built anticipation for his professional debut. The depth of Nike's commitment became even more apparent when you examine their product development strategy. They created custom all-gray Nike Air DT Max 96 sneakers and Vapor Edge 360 DT cleats specifically for Sanders, featuring his S2 logo, a square $sign nodding to his Num2 jersey that subtly reinforced his business-minded approach to his career. The real-time marketing capabilities that Nike demonstrated following Sanders' preseason debut represent a new standard for sports marketing responsiveness. Sanders' NFL preseason debut on August 9, 2025 saw him complete 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and a touchdown, prompting an immediate Nike ad campaign. The speed of this response was unprecedented. Within hours, Nike Football had produced and distributed a professionally crafted advertisement that captured the essence of the moment. The ad, featuring the caption caption "Only a Matter of Time" alongside imagery of Sanders in Brown's gear was shared across platforms like Instagram and X, amassing over 11 million impressions in under 24 hours, quadrupling Nike's average post engagement. This wasn't just marketing, this was cultural moment creation in real time. The merchandising strategy that Nike deployed represents perhaps the most comprehensive approach ever taken for a rookie athlete. Their product lineup spans across multiple categories and price points, ensuring maximum accessibility while maintaining premium positioning. The jersey collection includes Cleveland Browns Shedeur Sanders 2025 NFL Draft Game jerseys available in men's, women's, and youth sizes, priced between $130 and $175. These aren't just standard jerseys. They feature mesh panels for breathability, authentic NFL shields, and ventilated fits that combine performance with style. The apparel line extends to graphic t-shirts with Sanders branding, priced accessibly between $30 and $50, making the brand accessible to younger fans while maintaining the premium Nike aesthetic. These items are strategically distributed through multiple channels, including Dick's Sporting Goods, eBay, and Rally House, ensuring maximum market penetration. The footwear component represents the crown jewel of this partnership. Nike has created limited releases of the Air DT Maxta 96 and Custom Pro Day editions, and Vapor Edge 360 DT cleats, priced between $150 and $200. These aren't just performance shoes. They're collectible pieces that connect Sanders' story to his father's legacy while establishing his own unique identity. Perhaps most importantly, Nike has masterfully leveraged social media amplification to create organic buzz that extends far beyond their own channel. Posts from influencers and sports insiders, such as Jordan Schultz sharing debut ads and Soul Retriever highlighting Times Square billboard placements, generate massive organic reach that traditional advertising could never achieve. The Times Square billboard campaign represents the pinnacle of Nike's commitment to Sanders. They unveiled a massive billboard highlighting his signature watch celebration, positioning him alongside the biggest names in sports and entertainment. This wasn't just about selling products. This was about declaring Sanders as a cultural icon worthy of the world's most famous advertising real estate. The rapid response advertising following his preseason debut garnered over 196,000 likes and thousands of reposts on a single post, demonstrating the kind of viral marketing momentum that represents every brand's dream scenario. The engagement rates were off the charts, with replies ranging from supportive comments like "tried to humble him and created a monster" to skeptical observations about Nike's marketing strategy. But the most revolutionary aspect of Nike's approach lies in their long-term vision for Sanders as more than just an athlete endorser. Reports suggest Sanders negotiated a percentage of merchandise royalties in both his NIL and rookie deals, creating a power move that shocked the NFL and aligned perfectly with Nike's interest in long-term athlete partnerships that grow beyond traditional endorsement structures. This partnership model could fundamentally change how brands approach athlete relationships. Instead of simply paying athletes to wear products, Nike has created a structure where Sanders' success directly correlates with their mutual financial benefit. The speculation about a potential signature shoe line, with teasers like the LL2C and Proto 92 models potentially slated for 2025 releases, suggests that this partnership is designed to evolve into something much bigger than anyone initially imagined. The international implications of Nike's Sanders strategy extend far beyond American football. The company has positioned Sanders as a global ambassador for athletic excellence and entrepreneurial spirit, creating content and campaigns that resonate with international audiences who may not follow NFL football but understand the universal appeal of overcoming adversity and achieving success through dedication and innovation. The data analytics driving Nike's Sanders campaign represent cutting-edge sports marketing science. The company has deployed sophisticated tracking systems to monitor engagement rates, conversion metrics, and sentiment analysis across multiple platforms, allowing them to optimize their messaging and product releases in real time based on consumer response patterns. The challenge that Nike faces now is managing the enormous expectations they've created while maintaining authentic connection with Sanders' journey. Some critics argue that the marketing machine might be getting ahead of on-field performance, but the jersey sales numbers suggest that consumers are buying into the narrative regardless of traditional performance metrics. The ripple effects of Nike's Sanders strategy are already being felt across the sports marketing industry. Competing brands are scrambling to identify and sign the next generation of athletes who might replicate Sanders' combination of athletic talent, business acumen, and cultural cultural relevance. This has led to an escalation in NIL deal values and increasingly sophisticated contract structures that blur the lines between endorsement deals and business partnerships. Nike's investment in Sanders also represents a broader strategic shift toward athlete empowerment and shared value creation. Rather than simply extracting value from athlete popularity, Nike has created a model that incentivizes mutual success and long-term relationship building. This approach recognizes that modern consumers are increasingly sophisticated about authenticity and are more likely to support brands that demonstrate genuine commitment to the athletes they partner with. The noise and controversies threatening to derail a promising start. Despite Sanders' impressive preseason debut and the record-breaking jersey sales that have captured headlines, storm clouds are gathering around the young quarterback that threatened to overshadow his on-field accomplishments. The very factors that made him a marketing phenomenon are now creating controversies that could derail his NFL career before it truly begins. The scrutiny began during the draft process, where anonymous NFL executives painted a disturbing picture of Sanders' character and attitude. Industry sources labeled him entitled with horrible body language, claiming he blamed teammates for mistakes and displayed arrogance in combine interviews. These character assassinations weren't isolated incidents. They represented a coordinated effort to undermine Sanders' draft stock that extended far beyond typical pre-draft evaluations. The depth of institutional resistance became apparent when examining the specific criticisms leveled against Sanders. Executives worried about his "look-at-me" attitude, pointing to moments where he flashed a diamond-studded watch during games while promoting his too legendary brand. One executive suggested that separating from his father would foster humility, revealing how deeply his family connections were viewed as liabilities rather than assets.
It shouldn't be, but it will be. Because I think that there's a lot of people that's looking for an excuse for him to fall. That doesn't mean it's the Cleveland Browns.
The media landscape surrounding Sanders has become increasingly hostile, with leaked anonymous criticisms creating a narrative that threatens to define his career trajectory. The Guardian described this as exposing the cruel heart of the NFL draft industry, where character assassinations through anonymous sources have become standard practice for undermining prospects who don't fit traditional molds. The racial undertones of these attacks cannot be ignored, particularly when examining the language and tone used to describe Sanders compared to his white counterparts. Critics have pointed to what some call a plantation mindset bias against outspoken black athletes who assert their worth and demand equitable treatment. The fact that Sanders dared to negotiate unprecedented contract terms and maintain ownership of his media rights seems to have triggered a particularly vicious backlash.
And what I'm thinking about is the fact that because people had a problem with his daddy for a multitude of reasons, it affected his draft stock. And so you have folks out here that are not rooting for this brother, but he's accustomed to adversity. He's accustomed to defying the odds.
Post-draft controversies have continued to plague Sanders, most notably the speeding incidents that occurred in June 2025. Sanders was cited for driving 91 miles per hour in a 65 zone and 101 miles per hour in a 60 zone, violations that drew immediate criticism from Cleveland Browns GM Andrew Berry, who called the behavior not smart and dangerous. Sanders initially failed to appear in court, but later paid fines and admitted to wrong choices during a Twitch stream. The speeding incidents became particularly damaging because they fed into existing narratives about Sanders' maturity and decision-making. Critics pointed to these violations as evidence that he prioritizes flash over substance, reinforcing stereotypes about entitled young athletes who believe rules don't apply to them. The fact that teammates like Myles Garrett had received similar citations without comparable backlash only highlighted the double standard Sanders faces.
What you bring to the table matters. The level of cachet, your gifts, your skills, etc. do have an impact, but also relationships or lack thereof, perceptions, first impressions, all of these kind of things. Whether it was the workout, whether it was his dad talking about, if my son go to a certain place, I ain't gonna be down for that.
The social media landscape has become increasingly toxic for Sanders, with critics using every misstep to validate their pre-existing negative opinions. Antonio Brown's vulgar social media attacks represent the extreme end of this spectrum, but they reflect a broader pattern of public figures attempting to tear down Sanders' success. Brown's explicit and degrading posts about Sanders demonstrate how personal attacks have replaced legitimate football analysis and discussions about the young quarterback. The pressure on Sanders extends beyond individual critics to institutional skepticism about his playing style and football acumen. Analysts have labeled him prone to hero ball tendencies and highlighted his sack proneness, 94 sacks in his final 2 college years. Though supporters argue these statistics reflect Colorado's poor offensive line protection rather than Sanders' decision-making.
We got the very best in Adam Schefter. There is none better, okay? And when you heard them talking about him, you heard folks calling teams, the Adam Schefflers, the Lewis Riddicks of the world, Ryan Clarks of the world, others, you as well. And you heard people saying, we ain't taking him. Before the draft even took place.
The Cleveland Browns organization finds itself managing not just a quarterback competition, but a public relations challenge that extends far beyond typical rookie situations. Sanders' presence has created unprecedented media attention, both positive and negative, that threatens to overshadow team objectives and create locker room distractions. The fact that he trolled GM Andrew Berry after his preseason performance, saying, "You're not fully proud," kind of, demonstrates how Sanders continues to court controversy even when experiencing success. The long-term implications of these controversies could prove more damaging than any on-field struggles. If Sanders cannot manage the external noise and continues to provide ammunition for his critics, it could undermine the very business empire he's worked to build. Sponsors and partners require athletes who represent stability and positive brand associations. Continued controversies could jeopardize the lucrative deals that have made him financially successful.
You change the narrative by how you ball.
But that,
like it's that simple.
Which, to his point, is keeping the main thing the main.
The psychological toll of constant scrutiny and criticism represents perhaps the greatest threat to Sanders' development as both a player and a person. Young athletes often struggle with the transition from college to professional sports under normal circumstances. Sanders faces this challenge while navigating unprecedented business arrangements, family expectations, and media attention that would challenge even veteran players. The injury concerns add another layer of vulnerability to Sanders' situation. His oblique injury during the preseason, while described as minor, highlighted how quickly circumstances can change for any NFL player. Injuries could limit his playing time and development opportunities, potentially providing critics with additional ammunition to question his durability and commitment. The quarterback room dynamics in Cleveland present ongoing challenges for Sanders' development. Competing with veterans like Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, plus rookie Dylan Gabriel, Sanders must prove himself worthy of playing time while managing the external pressures that his teammates don't face. The comparison between his 106.8 preseason rating and Gabriel's 66.1 rating with an interception favors Sanders, but injury and depth chart politics could still limit his opportunities.
And I'm rooting for the brother, and I hope that he does well tonight.
The ultimate test for Sanders will be whether he can maintain focus on football excellence while managing unprecedented external pressures that would challenge any professional athlete. His response to criticism, his ability to learn from mistakes, and his commitment to team success will determine whether he fulfills his potential or becomes another cautionary tale about talent derailed by circumstances beyond pure football ability. The stakes couldn't be higher, not just for Sanders personally, but for the broader question of whether young athletes can successfully challenge traditional power structures while maintaining the focus and humility necessary for athletic success. Every game, every interview, and every public appearance becomes a referendum on whether Sanders represents the future of athlete empowerment or a dangerous precedent that threatens team chemistry and league stability. The noise surrounding Sanders will only intensify as his profile grows, making his ability to drown out the noise, as Stephen A.Smith advised, perhaps the most crucial skill he needs to develop for long-term success in the NFL. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.
This sort of persistent narrative that you're trying to sabotage Shedeur Sanders, especially after yesterday and not putting him in.
Shedeur Sanders has been having a rough time with the Browns. Now, new heated footage with team owner Jimmy Haslam has surfaced. Fans believe the clip shows Shedeur confronting him over unfair treatment inside the organization. I've got the details, so let's break it all down. The draft day disaster that changed everything. Things are getting tougher for Sanders. His rookie year is already off to a rocky start, and now the heated footage everyone's talking about has taken the situation to another level. To really understand what's happening in the clip, we need to rewind to where it all began. If you haven't been following, Shedeur Sanders entered the 2025 NFL draft cycle as one of the most highly anticipated quarterback prospects, fueled by his impressive college production, family pedigree as the son of NFL Hall of Famer Deion Sanders, and a media narrative that positioned him as a potential franchise savior. The hype surrounding this young man was absolutely unprecedented, with analysts and betting markets frequently projecting him as a top 10 pick, and some even considering him for the coveted #1 overall selection. But what happened on those fateful days in Green Bay, Wisconsin, during the 2025 NFL Draft wasn't just surprising, it was absolutely earth-shattering.
Tonight, Shedeur Sanders made the entire National Football League look like a whole bunch of petty fools. In some cases, racist fools. In many cases, Deion despising fools.
The football world watched in complete disbelief as team after team, pick after pick, passed on a quarterback who had just completed one of the most statistically dominant seasons in college football history. Let's talk about those numbers for a moment because they're absolutely staggering. In his final college season at Colorado in 2024, Sanders led the Buffaloes to a 9-4 record and an Alamo Bowl appearance, showcasing elite efficiency and production that drew comparisons to NFL-ready passers. We're talking about 4,134 passing yards, third in the entire FBS, 37 touchdowns, second in the FBS, and perhaps most impressively, a 74.0% completion percentage that led the entire Football Bowl subdivision. These weren't just good numbers, they were historically exceptional. Over his entire college career, including his time at Jackson State, Sanders amassed 7,623 passing yards, 65 touchdowns, and a 70% completion rate, setting school records at Colorado and earning Heisman Trophy votes. The expert consensus was equally impressive. ESPN's Mel Kiper Jr. had Sanders as high as number 6 overall in early 2025 mocks, praising his Polish and low error rate. By April, Kiper was calling him a potential QB1. The betting markets reflected this overwhelming confidence as well, with DraftKings having Sanders listed as the plus 100 favorite for number 1 overall in late April 2024. But as we now know, none of that mattered. As the first round began on that Thursday night in Green Bay, something unprecedented started to unfold.
Shedeur Sanders made all those teams that had 143 chances to draft him before he went 144th. He shamed all of them, including the Cleveland Browns, who finally took him in the 5th round. I'm convinced only because the owner, the publicity-starved owner, just wanted some more shock value publicity.
Team after team with glaring quarterback needs began passing on Sanders. The Tennessee Titans at pick 4, the Carolina Panthers at 5, the Las Vegas Raiders at 6, the Chicago Bears at 7. All teams with questionable quarterback situations, all passed on a player who had been universally recognized as one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. The second day brought even more confusion and heartbreak. As round 2 began, more QB-needy teams continued to pass on Sanders, including the Browns at their original pick 35, the Jets at pick 36, and the Raiders again at pick 38. Quinn Ewers went at pick 40 to the Broncos, and Jackson Dart at pick 45 to the Steelers, both quarterbacks who had been ranked behind Sanders in most mock drafts. But the most cruel moment came during round 2, when Sanders became the victim of one of the most heartless pranks in draft history. While live streaming on Twitch from his draft party, Sanders received a call from someone pretending to be Saints GM Mickey Loomis, claiming New Orleans was trading up for him. Sanders excitedly shared the news on his stream, only to realize moments later that it was a complete hoax perpetrated by Ole Miss students who had somehow obtained his phone number.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Let's be legendary.
Hey, but you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, man.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
The video went viral instantly, showing Sanders visibly upset, saying, "That's not funny, man." It was a devastating blow that perfectly encapsulated just how far this once promising draft story had fallen into chaos and humiliation. As day 2 concluded with Sanders still undrafted through 100 picks, we were witnessing what many draft experts were calling the most dramatic quarterback slide in modern NFL history. This was a player who had been projected as a top 10 pick, universally recognized as one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft, and yet 100 teams had passed on him.
Well, Molly, I don't think, look, the draft isn't about fairness. That's really not what it's about, you know? And I think the reason why I say that is because I've said numerous different times, this whole process is very subjective, all right? It's very opinionated. There's human beings who are trying to assess players and their fit relative to the NFL and relative to their own, individual franchise.
The media reaction was swift and intense. Analysts who had spent months praising Sanders were now scrambling to explain how their evaluations could have been so far off base. Social media exploded with theories ranging from team prejudice to family interference to secret character concerns that hadn't been made public. The subplot that made this story even more compelling was the presence of Deion Sanders throughout the process. Before the draft, Deion had made public statements about certain teams he wouldn't allow his son to play for, creating tension with NFL front offices who weren't accustomed to being dictated to by players' families.
People were not comfortable with the risk that would be associated with taking him in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round. That doesn't mean I agree with it. That doesn't mean that anybody agrees with it. That just means that that's what the teams felt. So now for him, he's going to have to go back and look at that process and say, hey, look, What was it during that process that somehow made these people, meaning the 32 teams, feel as though I wasn't worthy of being picked much higher than I was?
Shedeur Sanders was finally drafted on Saturday, April 26, 2025, by the Cleveland Browns in the 5th round. But the question on everyone's mind was simple. How does a quarterback with these credentials, this production, and this level of pre-draft hype fall this far? The answer, as we would soon discover, was far more complex and controversial than anyone could have imagined. The stage was now set for what would become one of the most controversial selections in NFL draft history, creating drama that would dominate headlines for months to come. The Cleveland catastrophe, when owners attack their own players. The Cleveland Browns' selection of Shedeur Sanders with the 144th overall pick should have been a moment of relief and celebration. After 3 grueling days of watching 143 other players get selected ahead of him, Sanders finally had an NFL home. But what should have marked the end of his draft nightmare was actually just the beginning of an even more complex and troubling story. The Browns didn't initially plan to draft Sanders, but pounced when he remained available deep into day 3. They began calling teams around pick 135 in the 4th round to gauge trade costs, ultimately identifying the Indianapolis Colts, number 144 spot, as their target. Cleveland traded their 5th round pick, number 166, and 6th round pick, number 192, to move up 22 spots. A minor investment that Browns GM Andrew Berry later characterized as an opportunistic value play.
I just say the biggest thing for us, we live by our board. We felt like he was a good, solid prospect at the most important position. We felt like it got to a point where he was probably mispriced, relative to the draft. Really the acquisition cost was pretty light, and it's a guy that we think can outproduce his draft slot. So I wouldn't say it's any more than that. Obviously Shedeur has kind of grown up in the spotlight. But our expectation is for him to come in here and work and compete. Nothing's been promised. Nothing will be given.
GM Andrew Berry's public comments painted the selection as a straightforward business decision. A talented player who had fallen further than his ability warranted. When Berry called Sanders to deliver the news, he was characteristically direct. "You're going to have to earn it. Nothing is given." It was a stern message that would prove to be prophetic in ways nobody could have anticipated. The situation became complicated immediately. The Browns had already drafted Oregon quarterback Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round, number 94 overall, making Sanders the 2nd quarterback selected by Cleveland in the same class. This created a dynamic where Sanders, despite his superior college credentials and pre-draft reputation, was entering a crowded quarterback room as the lowest man on the depth chart. Sanders entered training camp as the 5th-string quarterback behind Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and Gabriel. Despite his impressive college resume and national attention, Sanders was receiving minimal first-team repetitions and was clearly being treated as a developmental project. By August 30th, 2025, following roster cuts, the Browns had streamlined their quarterback room to just 3 players, Flacco as the starter, Gabriel as the backup, and Sanders as QB3. Sanders found himself behind Gabriel, a player who had been drafted in the 3rd round, but was performing significantly better in practices and preseason games. Sanders' preseason performances proved inconsistent. In his preseason debut against Carolina, Sanders showed flashes of brilliance, but in subsequent appearances, particularly against the Rams, he struggled significantly, taking multiple sacks and appearing uncomfortable under pressure.
Shedeur Sanders did not play well. He took 5 sacks, he was 3 of 6 for 14 yards. And as good as he looked week 1 against Carolina is kind of how bad he looked week 3. Plenty of factors here. Obviously, people have pointed out online that 4 of the 5 old linemen he played with have already been released.
The performance issues provided ammunition for critics who had questioned Sanders' NFL readiness. Scouting reports had consistently highlighted concerns about his pocket presence, tendency to hold the ball too long, and struggles when facing pressure. But the real bombshell came when Browns owner Jimmy Haslam made comments that would ignite a firestorm of controversy. During a press conference on July 29, 2025, Haslam made the stunning decision to publicly distance himself from the Sanders selection.
We have good process, okay? And if you'd have told me, let's see, we picked him on Saturday, right? Friday night driving home, y'all are going to pick Shedeur, I would say that's not happening. But we had a conversation early that morning, and then we had a conversation later that day. I think we had the right people involved in the conversation. At the end of the day, that's Andrew Berry's call. Andrew made the call to pick Shedeur.
We have good process, okay? And if you'd have told me, let's see, we picked him on Saturday, Friday night driving home, y'all are going to pick Shedeur, I would say that's not happening. But we had a conversation early that morning, and then we had a conversation later that day. I think we had the right people involved in the conversation. At the end of the day, that's Andrew Berry's call. Andrew made the call to pick Shedeur. These comments were absolutely unprecedented. Haslam explicitly stated that he had nothing to do with the selection of Shedeur Sanders and emphasized that the decision was Barry's alone. For an owner to so publicly disavow a draft pick was virtually unheard of in the NFL. Haslam's comments drew immediate parallels to the Browns' 2014 draft of Johnny Manziel, a pick that was widely attributed to ownership intervention despite front office reservations. The fact that Haslam felt compelled to distance himself from the Sanders pick suggested he was trying to avoid a repeat of that narrative. But the timing raised questions. Multiple sources reported that there had been 2 separate meetings on draft day to discuss what to do if Sanders was still available when Cleveland picked.
It's one thing if the GM has the absolute call and he walks into the room and it's time to make the pick at 144 and he says...
There's no meeting and
he says,
I want this guy.
2 meetings.
Right.
What do you think the meetings were about? Consider the context. What were they meeting about? What they're going to do with the round 7 pick? No. They had a couple of meetings to talk about what they're going to do. And my guess is the first meeting was before round 4 and the second meeting was after round 4.
The media reaction to Haslam's comments was swift and harsh. Analysts and former players criticized the owner for potentially undermining Sanders before he had even taken a meaningful snap. The perception was that Haslam was setting up Sanders as a scapegoat, positioning himself to avoid blame if the pick didn't work out. Adding another layer to the dysfunction was the emergence of video footage showing Sanders confronting Cleveland reporters who had been critical of his play. In one notable incident, Sanders approached veteran Cleveland reporter Tony Grossi, who had been questioning Sanders' readiness.
So take a look at this clip of how Shedeur handled this confrontation with class.
Tony, I be hoping you got something positive to say about me. You always say negative stuff about me. And I'm like, I ain't do nothing to you. No. I ain't seen nothing positive that you ever said. I think I'm positive every day. But I'm saying, come on, Tony. What I do to you, Tony?
Wow, talk about handling it like a pro. Shedeur Sanders kept it light and classy, turning what could have been a tense showdown into a moment of charm and confidence.
While Sanders handled the confrontation professionally, the incident highlighted the growing tension surrounding his situation. The organizational dynamics created by having 2 rookie quarterbacks proved to be a source of ongoing tension, with Sanders carrying far more media attention despite receiving fewer opportunities than Gabriel. Cam Newton provided perspective on Sanders' situation, emphasizing that the young quarterback needed to focus on proving himself through his play.
Man, he was a 5th round pick.
Yep.
This is what you have to understand. The facts are what the facts are.
Yeah.
He was a 5th round pick. Stardom aside, he's a 5th round pick. What you have to do is put your head down and grind. And the thing that a lot of people don't give enough credit for quarterbacks is the game is not just solely about completing the pass. Mm-hmm. The game is more focused on the neck up.
The Cleveland situation had become a perfect storm of organizational dysfunction, owner interference, and media scrutiny. Sanders found himself caught between an owner who had publicly disavowed him and coaches who seemed hesitant to give him opportunities. But what was happening in Cleveland was actually just a small part of a much larger story that was about to be exposed. The conspiracy explodes, collusion claims and shocking revelations. What started as questions about a draft slide and organizational dysfunction was about to explode into something far more sinister and far-reaching. The NFL was about to face some of the most serious allegations of systematic discrimination and collusion in its modern history. The first bombshell came from an unexpected source. On August 21st, 2025, Pro Football Hall of Famer Eric Dickerson made an explosive claim on the Pivot podcast that would send shockwaves throughout the sports world. Dickerson alleged that the NFL had instructed teams not to draft Sanders in order to make an example of him, citing his poor interviews and perceived entitlement as justification for what amounted to a league-wide blackballing effort. The NFL told teams, "Don't take this kid," Dickerson stated with absolute certainty. But then somebody called the Browns and said, "Hey, take him anyway." The implications were staggering. If true, they suggested a coordinated effort by the league office to manipulate draft outcomes based on personal and political considerations rather than football merit. Dickerson's allegations gained credibility when considered alongside pre-draft reports from CBS CBS's Boomer Esiason, who had revealed that multiple owners had instructed their front offices to remove Sanders from their draft boards due to his torpedoed reputation. But if Dickerson's claims were shocking, what came next was absolutely explosive. Antonio Brown, the former NFL wide receiver known for his controversial statements, made even more specific allegations about the Sanders situation. Brown claimed that there had been a secret agreement among 31 NFL owners to avoid drafting Sanders, with only Jimmy Haslam and the Cleveland Browns breaking rank. Haslam broke the agreement, Brown posted on X, formerly Twitter. 31 teams said untouchable, but Browns went rogue. The motivation behind this alleged conspiracy was rooted in the NFL's desire to maintain control over player power and family influence. Deion Sanders' pre-draft comments about certain teams being unsuitable for his son, combined with Shedeur's confident demeanor, had apparently triggered a coordinated response from league leadership. The theories gained additional traction when Stephen A.Smith suggested that Sanders' treatment had uncomfortable racial undertones. Smith argued that white quarterbacks with similar attitudes wouldn't face the same level of systematic exclusion, drawing parallels to the treatment of Colin Kaepernick.
And why do I bring up Kaepernick? Because I keep reminding everybody that the owners, I'll never forget this as long as I live. The owners in the National Football League are very big on control. And Colin Kaepernick's position really railed them. It really riled them up, irritated them, because even though they received a check for over $246 million a piece because of their TV rights deal, they were mad it wasn't $250 to $255. They blamed Colin Kaepernick.
Smith's analysis provided historical context, pointing to the NFL's previous handling of controversial players in situations where ownership had seemingly coordinated responses to players who challenged league authority.
So in other words, you're willing to collectively send that kind of message, and don't act like it wasn't a collective effort. For all we know, teams collectively, meaning owners, had come to the conclusion nobody's gonna touch them in the first 4 rounds. All right, now that the round 5 is here, our message has been sent, so y'all can go about the business of sort of lifting the embargo, for lack of a better phraseology.
So in other words, you're willing to collectively send that kind of message and don't act like it wasn't a collective effort. For all we know, teams collectively, meaning owners, have come to the conclusion nobody's going to touch him in the first 4 rounds. All right, now that the round 5 is here, our message has been sent, so y'all can go about the business of sort of lifting the embargo, for lack of a better phraseology. But perhaps the most damning aspect of the allegations centered on what many believe was the real reason for Sanders' treatment: his unprecedented contract demands and business arrangements. Reports emerged suggesting that Sanders had negotiated groundbreaking clauses in his rookie contract that could set dangerous precedents for future player negotiations. According to these reports, Sanders had secured what was being called a prime equity clause that gave him a percentage of all revenue generated from merchandise, sponsorships, and promotions tied to his name, image, and likeness. This arrangement effectively turned Sanders into a business partner rather than just an employee.
That the Cleveland Brown rookie quarterback has included a groundbreaking clause in his contract that could set a new standard in the NFL. So he has leverage, and he tried to use his leverage, and he did use his leverage to get something put in his contract. He says, as uncertain as quarterback Shedeur Sanders' future is in the NFL right now, one thing is for sure: he's transformed how NFL contracts work, and he hasn't even taken his first snap. The NFL don't like that.
The implications were staggering. If Sanders succeeded on the field, other players would inevitably demand similar equity arrangements, fundamentally altering the economic structure of professional sports. The NFL's alleged response to systematically limit Sanders' opportunities represented an effort to prevent this precedent from taking hold. Sanders had also reportedly negotiated unprecedented media rights, allowing his brother Deion Jr. to produce behind-the-scenes content and brand.
This is why they hate Shedeur Sanders. This is what it's about, man. It's that the things that he's coming in negotiating have never been done before. They always want it, and they like it for players to stay in a position of servitude. Hey, you come in, you run fast, you jump high, you say yes sir, no sir, and we'll tell you what you're allowed to have.
The theories reached their peak when Commissioner Roger Goodell himself was captured on video making cryptic comments about being worried about Deion Sanders.
Hey, big guy. What's going on? Hey, look. You doing all right? You gotta let my brother have his way in the league. Yeah, you gotta. I'm worried about your pop. How you doing? What you worried about him for?
I'm worried about your pops. What you worried about him for? Why would they be worried about Deion Sanders? Deion Sanders ain't gonna be on the field. Deion Sanders ain't gonna be taking the snaps. Deion Sanders retired.
The significance of Goodell's comments cannot be overstated. Here was the most powerful person in professional football expressing concern about a retired player who had no official role in the NFL. Tom Brady weighed in on the Sanders situation, offering support from someone who understood the challenges of navigating NFL politics.
Shedeur Sanders, why did he go so late in the draft?
It's a good question. I wouldn't have part of any evaluation process or to
Skip Bayless
see
says
that.
otherwise.
That's the problem with media is everyone can just say whatever the fuck they want. I actually texted Shedeur because I know him very well. And I said, dude, whatever happens, wherever you go, that's your first day. Day 2 matters more than the draft. I was 199. Who could speak on it better than me? Like what that really means. Use it as motivation. You're gonna get your chances, go take advantage of it.
The theories reached their peak when a fan filed a $100 million lawsuit against the NFL, alleging discrimination and collusion in Sanders' draft treatment.
And is suing him for $100 million because of Shedeur Sanders falling to the 5th round of NFL draft, claiming emotional distress, trauma, and other things.
Is there a way to add
the fan? Yeah.
Can I
and
add
collusion.
Can I add my name to that lawsuit?
Oh, gonna make it.
You wanted to be
class action. We ain't got to spend a lot of time on this because I don't think the court is going to spend a lot of time on this.
He doesn't have money for the suit.
Yeah. But someone did write about this, and there's some interesting points. I don't want to let it out. The dude does have something to stand on.
Legal experts pointed out that proving collusion would require evidence of direct communication between teams specifically designed to suppress Sanders' draft position.
You have your right to not draft somebody because you don't like them.
Yeah.
They just can't get together and say, we're not drafting this dude till.
Just like they
absolutely
put that,
correct.
Just like they put that sign up and say, we refuse the right to search.
But that's why the NFL wouldn't want this going to trial, because they wouldn't want discovery. They wouldn't want to open up all the emails and all of that stuff to search just in case.
Yeah.
As the saga continued, additional evidence emerged that seemed to support the theories. Sanders' jersey sales reportedly reached unprecedented levels for a 5th round pick, generating millions in revenue.
Says this is already paid off. Shedeur's rookie jersey has reportedly hit $250 million in sales, earning him $14 million in commission, which far exceeds most rookie earnings. In addition, he retains full ownership of all his personal media content.
The financial success of Sanders' brand, despite his limited playing time, provided what many viewed as proof that NFL executives had misjudged both his marketability and his value to the league. Whether the theories are ultimately proven true or false, there's no denying that Sanders' experience has exposed significant issues within the NFL's power structure. His story has become a lightning rod for broader discussions about race, privilege, family influence, and player empowerment in professional sports. The heated footage and public confrontations represent just the visible surface of what appears to be a much deeper struggle for control within the National Football League. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content. Stephen A.Smith just went off on Shedeur Sanders. If you've been following, Shedeur hasn't exactly had the smoothest run in the league, and now word is he's signing a deal outside the NFL. Let's just say Stephen A. isn't happy about it.
That is a crime. It is a disgrace.
But that's not all. He's also dropping some serious revelations about what's really been going on with Sanders. Let me break it down. The live confrontation that shook the NFL. Stephen A. Smith is never one to hold back his words, but what just happened on Instagram Live left fans shocked. In real time, millions of people watched as Stephen A. confronted Shedeur Sanders, the son of Hall of Famer D and Primetime Sanders, about his controversial new contract outside of the NFL. Shedeur isn't just another young quarterback chasing his dreams. He's the son of one of the most polarizing and legendary figures in football history. For Stephen A., who has spent decades calling out hypocrisy and cutting through the excuses of athletes, owners, and coaches alike, the fact that Shedeur bypassed the NFL system to sign an outside deal was enough to ignite a firestorm. Shedeur Sanders came into the league with more pressure than most rookies could ever imagine. Not only did scouts project him as a potential first-round talent, but many analysts believed he could end up being the face of a franchise. Yet instead of a dream NFL landing, Shedeur slid to the later rounds of the draft, leaving fans and insiders stunned. Stephen A. himself once said,
And the fact that this brother hasn't been picked in the first 3 rounds, that is a crime. It is a disgrace.
Those weren't empty words. They were a warning, a foreshadowing, because what came next looked less like a football decision and more like what Stephen A. described as collusion between NFL owners to keep Shedeur from thriving in their system, all because of his father, Deion Sanders. When Shedeur decided to sign his new contract outside of the NFL framework, it was like throwing gasoline on a fire that was already burning. Critics immediately called it reckless. Insiders whispered that it was career suicide. But in Shedeur's eyes, this was about control, about taking his future out of the hands of NFL front offices that had already shown they didn't want him on their terms. Stephen A.Smith wasn't going to let that slide, not on his watch. When he went live with Shedeur, the confrontation got heated. We're talking about a man who has built his reputation on never mincing words and a young quarterback who is tired of being treated like a pawn in a game controlled by powerful executives. At one point, Stephen A. looked directly into the camera and told Shedeur,
"It's like understood. We don't want him because we don't like his daddy. We don't like his dad."
Do you understand how powerful that statement is? This wasn't just about Shedeur. This was about his bloodline, his last name, the fact that his father has spent years challenging the establishment, and now Shedeur is paying the price. This isn't just about football. This is about power, control, and whether or not a young black quarterback with talent, poise, and pedigree will ever be allowed to break free from the system that has chewed up and spit out so many before him. That's why Stephen A. went after him so hard on IG Live, because in his eyes, Shedeur wasn't just making a career decision, he was challenging the very fabric of the NFL. While Stephen A. has always been quick to criticize NFL ownership for their double standards, on this night, he turned that same energy towards Shedeur himself. It was almost as if he was saying, if you want to fight the machine, you better be ready for the consequences. Remember, this is the same league that blackballed Colin Kaepernick for kneeling during the national anthem, the same league that, as Stephen A. himself pointed out, handed every owner a $246 million check while still blaming Kaepernick for costing them millions. So the message was clear. The NFL doesn't forgive, and it sure as hell doesn't forget. But Shedeur wasn't backing down. He pushed back, defending his decision, saying he wasn't about to let his destiny be dictated by a group of men who already showed they didn't believe in him. And when he said it, you could hear the frustration, the same frustration his father has carried for years.
That if he didn't like the situation his son was in, he was going to pull him up out of there. Stuff like that. On the NFL level, can't do that.
Meanwhile, fans in the comments were losing their minds. Some called Stephen A. a hypocrite. Others said Shedeur was throwing his career away. And a few brave voices typed what everyone was really thinking, that maybe this was exactly what the NFL was afraid of. Because if Shedeur Sanders succeeds outside of their system, it exposes the truth they've worked so hard to hide, that their monopoly on football talent isn't as unshakable as they want us to believe. This IG Live wasn't just a confrontation. It was a symbol of the generational clash between an old guard that believes in playing the game by the rules of billionaires and a new wave of athletes who are willing to risk it all for independence. The fallout and the deeper truth. The IG Live was supposed to be a quick conversation. At least that's what fans thought when the notification popped up on their phones. Stephen A.Smith is live with Shedeur Sanders, but instead of a casual back and forth, viewers quickly realized they were watching a career-defining showdown unfold in real time. The fallout was immediate, viral, and messy. Within minutes, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube were flooded with re-uploads, reaction videos, and commentary. Hashtags like #Shedeur Sanders, #Stephen A, and #NFlexPose trended overnight. But it wasn't just the words, it was the timing. Shedeur had just finalized a multi-million-dollar contract outside of NFL structures, reportedly tied to endorsements, media deals, and opportunities that went beyond just football. It was the kind of contract that no fifth-round rookie in NFL history had ever been offered, and that made owners nervous. Because what happens if Shedeur Sanders doesn't need the NFL to succeed? What happens if other players follow his lead? Suddenly, the league's control over young talent begins to crack. Fans expected Stephen A. to dominate the conversation. He's a seasoned broadcaster after all. But Shedeur, calm yet firm, didn't back down. He reminded everyone that his entire life had been spent under a microscope. From dominating at Jackson State to putting Colorado back on the map with his father as head coach, Shedeur wasn't new to pressure. And when Stephen A. pushed him about running away from the NFL system, Shedeur clapped back. If the NFL didn't want me, then why should I give them control over me? They had their chance. I'm not begging for a seat at their table. I'm building my own. The comment section blew up. Supporters flooded with fire emojis and phrases like "talk your talk," while critics critics typed angrily, "You'll regret this. Nobody beats the NFL." By the next morning, sports outlets across the nation picked up the story. Skip Bayless called it the boldest move we've ever seen from a rookie quarterback. Shannon Sharp compared it to what Colin Kaepernick faced when his activism collided with ownership interests. ESPN replayed the IG Live clip nearly every hour, but the most chilling reaction came from insiders. Anonymous NFL executives reportedly told journalists that Shedeur had burned bridges and would never play meaningful downs in the league again. It was eerily reminiscent of what happened during the draft. Remember, Shedeur wasn't just overlooked, he was humiliated by being left to fall all the way to the later rounds despite being labeled a top 20 talent by Mel Kiper Jr. Stephen A. himself had predicted that the draft snub wasn't about talent, it was about politics. And now, by confronting Shedeur so openly, he forced the NFL's dirty laundry into the spotlight again. This wasn't just about Shedeur, it was about his father, Deion Sanders. Deion has always been larger than life. Hall of Fame cornerback, Super Bowl champion, TV personality, and now a college coach who turned Colorado into a media circus. Owners already hated how much attention he commanded.
Usually injuries or off-the-field issues force you to plummet, none of which applies to Shedeur Sanders.
Stephen A. connected the dots on IG Live, saying out loud what executives have whispered for months, that Shedeur was being punished because of who his father is. Think about that for a second. The NFL, a league that prides itself on being a meritocracy, was accused of blackballing a young QB not because of his ability, but because of his last name. That's bigger than football. That's systemic. That's the kind of accusation that makes fans question everything. NFL franchises have bent over backwards to give chances to players with DUIs, assault charges, and all kinds of off-field issues. Yet Shedeur Sanders, who has no history of legal trouble, no behavioral concerns, and nothing but production on the field, was being treated like a problem child. Why? Because his father once dared to say he wanted some control over his son's career path.
I think where they made a huge mistake is that everyone is going to think collusion.
Right.
Because you can't say there's 5 quarterbacks in the draft that were better than Shedeur Sanders.
And that's hypocrisy. Teams are fine overlooking DUIs and locker room meltdowns, but the idea of a father advocating for his son, suddenly that's too much trouble. As the IG Live replay spread, fans were split right down the middle. Team Shedeur argued that he was blazing a new trail, carving out freedom from an NFL system designed to control players. They compared him to pioneers in music and business who refused to sell out. Team Stephen A. insisted that Shedeur was making a huge mistake, throwing away the prestige and legacy of playing in the NFL for quick money and short-term clout. Perhaps the most telling reaction was the one that didn't happen. The NFL itself stayed silent. No press release, no comment, no attempt to spin the narrative. And that silence spoke louder than any statement could. It was as if the league knew that acknowledging Shedeur's contract or Stephen A.'s explosive comments would only legitimize the controversy. But silence doesn't erase perception. And the perception growing among fans was this: the NFL was scared.
And then we have to take into reality what we saw. Shedeur Sanders looked very, very bad. Very bad.
By the end of the week, Shedeur Sanders had gone from overlooked rookie to one of the most talked about names in sports. He had done what few could ever imagine, forced the most powerful sports league in America into the shadows of a conversation it couldn't control. While Stephen A. thought he was holding Shedeur accountable, what he really did was spotlight the cracks in the NFL's armor, the hate machine, and what it really means. If you think the IG Live confrontation was the end of the story, you're wrong, because what came after was something even more revealing: the systematic hate campaign that followed Shedeur Sanders everywhere he went. And when you examine why so many people pile onto Shedeur, you start to see a pattern that goes far deeper than football. Let's break down why Shedeur Sanders gets more hate than almost any other young quarterback in recent memory. First, there's the silver spoon narrative. One of the loudest arguments against Shedeur is that he had everything handed to him. From the moment he stepped on the field, critics pointed to his father, Deion Sanders, and claimed Shedeur never had to grind like other players. They say every opportunity, from Jackson State to Colorado, was orchestrated by Primetime himself. But here's the hypocrisy. NFL franchises routinely draft quarterbacks who come from football dynasties. The Manning brothers, Patrick Mahomes' father being a pro athlete, even the Bosa family, all celebrated for their pedigree. So why is Shedeur being labeled a Nepo baby, while others are praised for having NFL bloodlines? The answer is uncomfortable, because his last name is Sanders, and because Deion has never played by the NFL's unwritten rules of silence and obedience. Then came the draft day humiliation. The NFL draft was a national spectacle, and Shedeur Sanders became its biggest storyline for all the wrong reasons. Analysts had him projected as a first-round pick, even labeling him a top 20 talent. Yet he wasn't picked until the later rounds. That's not just a fall, that's a free fall. Fans who didn't know the politics behind the scenes assumed one thing: he must must not be that good. So from the start of his pro career, Shedeur was fighting uphill against the narrative that he was overhyped. And when he had one bad preseason performance, 3 completions, 5 sacks, and 14 yards, critics jumped at the chance to scream, "See, we told you so." Let's be honest, people hate when athletes get paid before proving themselves. Shedeur's new contract outside the NFL was reportedly worth more than some active NFL rookies' entire deals. And the fact that a 5th-round pick could secure that kind of money enraged traditionalists. In their minds, he was cashing out before putting in the work. They saw it as arrogance, a slap in the face to the league. But here's the truth. Shedeur is just playing the same game owners play. They leverage players for profit every single day. He's just flipping the script, making sure he benefits this time. And that's exactly why the hate burns so hot. Because deep down, people don't hate Shedeur. They hate that he outsmarted the system. There's also the arrogance tag. This one is straight out of the NFL's playbook. Before the draft, anonymous scouts whispered about Shedeur being too brash and not coachable. Some even claimed his combine interviews turned off executives. But here's the kicker. Those same executives praised white quarterbacks in the past for having swagger or confidence. When Joe Burrow shows swagger, it's leadership. When Shedeur does it, it's arrogance.
But also, you mentioned the fact that why would they sabotage an NFL Legends player? I think that's part of it too.
Let's not forget, every ounce of hate Shedeur gets is multiplied by his father's presence. Deion Sanders isn't just a dad. He's a Hall of Famer, a cultural icon, and one of the most unapologetic personalities in sports history. He's also a man who has never hesitated to call out hypocrisy, whether in the NFL, NCAA, or media. Owners don't like being challenged. They don't like the idea of a father openly demanding control over his son's career path. And so Shedeur gets caught in the crossfire of his father's reputation. The saddest truth of all, a lot of fans want Shedeur to fail. Why? Because it validates their worldview. If he succeeds, it proves that the NFL system can be bypassed, that legacy and independence can win. But if he fails, it proves the haters right, that you can't beat the machine.
Here's the sad part about what we saw this weekend. That may be the only time we see Shedeur Sanders on the NFL field this year. That will be our lasting memory.
Stephen A. even hinted at this during First Take. That's the narrative fans cling to. And until Shedeur proves otherwise, they'll use every misstep to fuel the hate. So why all the hate? It's not just one reason. That's all of it. He's Deion's son. He didn't play by the rules. He got money before success. He carries himself with confidence. He challenges the NFL's power. That combination makes him a lightning rod. And while most young quarterbacks are given time to grow, Shedeur Sanders is being judged in real time, under a microscope, by millions of people waiting for him to trip. But here's the twist. Hate isn't always a curse. Sometimes it's fuel. And if Shedeur can turn that hate into motivation, he just might flip the script on everyone rooting against him. Because history tells us one thing, the more they hate, the sweeter the victory becomes when you prove them wrong. If there's one thing we've learned from this saga, it's that Stephen A.Smith is never afraid to say what everyone else is too scared to say. That IG Live moment with Shedeur Sanders wasn't an exception. It was the latest chapter in a career built on confrontation, accountability, and putting people on blast when the rest of the sports world looks the other way. For decades, Stephen A. has called out athletes, owners, coaches, and executives on their misconduct, sometimes making enemies, always making headlines. Oh, Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, or so many would have you believe. But Stephen A. Smith isn't buying it. He's consistently questioned Brady's greatness, arguing that his team's strong defense has played a significant role in his success. In a 2020 interview with ESPN, Stephen A. stated, "Tom Brady's not the greatest quarterback of all time. I think he's been blessed with the circumstances that he's played in." Stephen A.'s criticism of Brady stems from his belief that the Patriots dynasty was built on more than just Brady's quarterbacking. He points to the team's consistent defensive performances and the coaching prowess of Bill Belichick as key factors in their success. While many NFL fans and analysts disagree with Stephen A.'s assessment, his opinions have sparked heated debates and discussions. But let's be real, Stephen A.'s beef with Tom Brady goes deeper than just football. He's been vocal about his disdain for Brady's TB12 lifestyle and his perceived lack of humility. In a 2017 episode of First Take, Stephen A. said, "Tom Brady's got to be kidding me with this TB12 stuff. He's not invincible. He's not a superhero." Stephen A.'s criticism of Brady's TB12 lifestyle is rooted in his skepticism about the effectiveness of Brady's nutrition and fitness plan. Many experts have questioned the scientific basis of Brady's diet, and Stephen A. believes that Brady's reliance on it is overhyped. "I don't think Tom Brady's TB12 lifestyle is the reason he's still playing at a high level," Stephen A. said in a 2020 interview. "I think it's because he's still got the skills, still got the talent, and still got the drive to succeed." Aaron Rodgers is another NFL icon who issues face Stephen A. to less scrutiny. Despite being a two-time NFL MVP and leading the Green Bay Packers to a Super Bowl victory, Stephen A. has questioned Rodgers' leadership skills and ability to perform under pressure. In a 2019 episode of First Take, Stephen A. said, "Aaron Rodgers is not the leader that Tom Brady is. He's not the guy that can take over a game like Tom Brady can." Stephen A.'s criticism of Rodgers centers around his perceived lack of leadership and inability to elevate his team's performance in critical situations. While Rodgers has undoubtedly demonstrated exceptional quarterbacking skills, Stephen A. believes that his leadership style and decision-making on the field are areas for improvement. But what's really going on here? Is Stephen A. just trying to stir up controversy, or does he genuinely believe that Rodgers isn't cut out for the big stage? Whatever the reason, Stephen A.'s opinions have sparked a lively debate among NFL fans. Odell Beckham Jr. is a talented wide receiver who's played for several teams, including the New York Giants and Cleveland Browns. However, Stephen A. has consistently questioned OBJ's work ethic and dedication to the game. In a 2019 interview with ESPN, Stephen A. stated, "Odell Beckham Jr. is a guy who's got a lot of talent, but he's got to prove himself to me as a worker." Stephen A.'s criticism of OBJ stems from his perception that the receiver hasn't consistently demonstrated a strong work ethic or dedication to improving his craft. While OBJ has undoubtedly shown flashes of brilliance on the field, Stephen A. believes that he needs to put in more effort to reach his full potential. But let's be real, OBJ's off-field antics haven't exactly helped his case. From his high-profile relationships to his lavish lifestyle, OBJ's personal life has been subject to scrutiny. Stephen A.'s opinions on OBJ's work ethic are just the latest salvo in a long-standing debate about the receiver's commitment to the game. Stephen A.'s opinion on Kaepernick's protest reflects his belief that athletes should respect the flag and the national anthem. While many people agree with Stephen A.'s stance, others argue that Kaepernick's actions were a legitimate form of peaceful protest against social injustice. The debate surrounding Kaepernick's protest has been intense, with many NFL players and personalities taking sides. Stephen A.'s opinions on the issue have been particularly polarizing, with some praising his candor and others criticizing him for being insensitive to the issues Kaepernick was trying to raise awareness about. Cam Newton is a talented quarterback who's led the Carolina Panthers to several playoff appearances. However, Stephen A. has questioned Newton's leadership skills and ability to perform under pressure. In a 2016 episode of First Take, Stephen A. said, "Cam Newton is a guy who's got a lot of talent, but he's got to prove himself to me as a leader." Stephen A.'s criticism of Newton centers around his perceived lack of leadership and inability to elevate his team's performance in critical situations. While Newton has undoubtedly demonstrated exceptional athleticism and quarterbacking skills, Stephen A. believes that his leadership style and decision-making on the field are areas for improvement. Antonio Brown is a talented wide receiver who's played for several teams, including the Pittsburgh Steelers and Oakland Raiders. However, Stephen A. has consistently questioned AB's commitment to his teams and criticized his off-field antics. In a 2019 episode of First Take, Stephen A. said, "Antonio Brown is a guy who's got a lot of talent, but he's got a lot of drama." Stephen A.'s criticism of AB stems from his perception that the receiver's off-field antics have overshadowed his on-field performance. From his feud with Ben Roethlisberger to his tumultuous departure from the Steelers, AB's personal life has been subject to scrutiny. Stephen A. believes that AB needs to focus on his football and leave the drama off the field. Josh Allen is a young quarterback who's led the Buffalo Bills to several playoff appearances. However, Stephen A. has questioned Allen's consistency and ability to lead his team to a Super Bowl victory. In a 2020 episode of First Take, Stephen A. said, "Josh Allen's got a lot of talent, but he's got to prove himself to me as a consistent quarterback." Stephen A.'s criticism of Allen centers around his perceived inconsistency on the field. While Allen has shown flashes of brilliance, Stephen A. believes that he needs to demonstrate more consistency and leadership to become a top-tier quarterback. Dak Prescott is a talented quarterback who's led the Dallas Cowboys to several playoff appearances. However, Stephen A. has questioned Prescott's leadership skills and criticized his contract negotiations. In a 2020 episode of First Take, Stephen A. said, "Dak Prescott's got to prove himself to me as a leader. He's got to show me that he's worth the money." Stephen A.'s criticism of Prescott stems from his perception that the quarterback's contract negotiations have been handled poorly. Stephen A. believes that Prescott needs to demonstrate more leadership and consistency on the field to justify his contract demands. Whether it's Tom Brady's GOAT status, Aaron Rodgers' leadership skills, or Odell Beckham Jr.'s work ethic, Stephen A. is always willing to share his opinions and spark debate. And let's be real, that's what makes him so compelling to watch. As he continues to cover the NFL and share his opinions, Stephen A. will undoubtedly remain a polarizing figure in the sports world. But whether you love him or hate him, one thing's for sure, Stephen A. Smith is a force to be reckoned with, and his opinions will continue. This is his brand. This is who he is. Stephen A. doesn't pull punches, he doesn't sugarcoat, and he doesn't protect feelings. So when Shedeur Sanders decided to bypass the NFL system and chase an outside contract, it was inevitable that Stephen A. would confront him. Dillon, not because he hates Shedeur, but because Stephen A. believes in shining a light on what he sees as bad decisions or hypocrisy, even if it means putting a 22-year-old rookie on the hot seat in front of millions. In the end, Shedeur Sanders' scandals and controversies may fade, but Stephen A.'s role in this saga proves one thing. As long as there are athletes making bold moves, there will always be Stephen A. Smith ready to call them out, no matter how uncomfortable the truth may be. So here's the final question. Will Shedeur Sanders collapse under the weight of all this hate, or will he turn into the one player who finally breaks the NFL's iron grip on its talent pipeline? Because if he succeeds outside the system, he won't just silence the haters. He'll change football forever. And that's why this confrontation wasn't just IG Live drama. It was history in the making. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen. From fifth-round slide to franchise savior, Shedeur Sanders has the entire NFL talking.
It's just part of it. You know, there's entertainers and there's competitors. And I totally understand that. My job is to compete.
Whether it's Dillon throwing shade at him, or Micah Parsons critiquing his ball-patting habits, or Eric Dickerson dropping conspiracy bombshells about league collusion.
That the NFL told other, don't draft him. Do not draft him. We're gonna make an example out of him.
Everyone's got something to say about Coach Prime's son, so let's break it down. Dillon Gabriel. The most manufactured controversy of the 2025 preseason erupted when Browns rookie quarterback Dillon Gabriel made what many interpreted as a not-so-subtle jab at his teammate Shedeur Sanders. During a halftime interview with NFL Network's Aditi Kinkhabwala on August 16, 2025, Gabriel was asked about tuning out the noise surrounding Cleveland's chaotic four-way quarterback competition. His response?
It's just part of it. You know, there's entertainers and there's competitors. And I totally understand that. My job is to compete.
The internet immediately exploded with speculation that Gabriel was taking a direct shot at Sanders, whose flashy personality and high-profile background made him an easy target for the entertainer label. Social media went into overdrive with posts calling Gabriel's comment everything from disgraceful to a calculated attempt to undermine a teammate. But here's where the story gets interesting. Gabriel quickly clarified his intentions during his post-game press conference.
First off, I'm all about our team. You know what I mean? And each other. I would never make that, and I've said it before, that's why it's interesting. You know, all you in this room are entertainers, and you have a job to do, and I respect it, right? And I'm a competitor, so I have a job to do as well.
He explained, making it clear he was referring to the media, not his quarterback room rival. The clarification came too late to stop the viral spread of the controversy, but Sanders himself eventually addressed it directly, revealing that Gabriel had approached him privately to set the record straight. The whole incident perfectly encapsulated the intense scrutiny surrounding Sanders and how even innocent comments could be twisted into quarterback controversy gold. While Gabriel's comments sparked teammate tensions, another Browns defensive back became Sanders' most visible supporter and created one of the season's most memorable moments. Tony Brown, Cleveland Browns cornerback. Tony Brown became the breakout star of Shedeur Sanders' viral NFL debut entrance, and his explanation for why he supported the rookie quarterback revealed the deep respect he held for the Sanders family legacy. On August 14, 2025, during an NFL Network interview, Brown opened up about the spiritual calling he felt to mentor Sanders.
I have the highest level of respect for what his father's done with his children and for what his father brought to the NFL, to the game of football.
Brown explained his admiration for Deion Sanders clearly influencing his relationship with the son. The veteran defensive back described feeling an immediate connection with Sanders from their first meeting, telling him directly.
Since the first day I met him, like I told him, hey, I want to be the guy that you can go to whenever, you know, with anything, bro.
But it was Brown's explanation of their now famous pregame entrance that really struck a chord. Carrying a bamboo box staff while pulling a massive speaker playing Sanders' unreleased rap music, Brown saw it as more than just theatrical flair. It's just a spiritual thing for me. I believe it's a calling to help young men like Shedeur, to help guide them, he said, framing his support as part of a higher purpose. The entrance helped Sanders channel that prime time energy before his debut performance against the Carolina Panthers, where he completed 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns, drawing 10.2 million viewers, the most watched NFL Network preseason game in a decade. From Brown's teammates to former NFL stars, the opinions on Sanders varied wildly. One Hall of Fame running back dropped perhaps the most explosive theory of all, Eric Dickerson. Hall of Fame running back Eric Dickerson dropped an absolute bombshell that had the entire NFL world shook to its core. On August 21st, 2025, during his appearance on the Roggin and Rodney show on AM 570 LA Sports, Dickerson made claims that would make even the wildest conspiracy theorists blush.
And I'll tell you this much here, what I heard from someone that's in the NFL, that the NFL told other, don't draft him. Do not draft him. We're gonna make an example out of him.
Now hold up, wait a minute. Did the Rams legend just accuse the entire National Football League of orchestrating a coordinated attack on Deion Sanders' son? According to Dickerson, this came from what he called a very good source, and the plan was reportedly to have Sanders go completely undrafted to teach him and his famous father a lesson about humility. But here's where it gets even juicier. Dickerson claimed that so allegedly an unnamed intervention forced Cleveland's hand at pick 144. Whether you believe this explosive theory or not, it certainly added fuel to the fire surrounding Sanders' dramatic slide from projected top 10 pick to 5th round selection, costing him potentially millions in guaranteed money and sparking debates that continue to rage today. But speaking of Cowboys stars having strong opinions about Sanders, one defender wasn't buying into the sympathy train: Micah Parsons. Dallas Cowboys superstar linebacker Micah Parsons decided to school some folks on quarterback fundamentals, and Shedeur Sanders became his unwitting student. Back on April 5th, 2025, Parsons took to social media with some technical criticism that had Sanders' supporters seeing red. The issue: Sanders' habit of patting the football before throwing, which Parsons argued could be the difference between completing a pass and eating a sack in the NFL. You realize that pat on the ball can be difference between a sack or a throwaway completion, Parsons wrote, speaking from his perspective as one of the league's most feared pass rushers. When New York Giants receiver Darius Slayton jumped in to defend Sanders by comparing his ball patting to Tom Brady's mechanics, Parsons wasn't having any of it. Comparing the greatest quarterback ever to Sanders is why I'll never entertain a football conversation with you. Like, what are we doing here? He fired back. This social media exchange quickly escalated into a full-blown family affair when Deion Sanders himself entered the chat, posting, "Can we all get along?" and emphasizing Sanders with a capital S. We earned that. Later, when Sanders' draft slide became reality, Parsons tried to provide some perspective, comparing it to Lamar Jackson's fall to pick 32 in 2018. Lamar Jackson, arguably one of the greatest QBs in college football, ever fell to pick 32. Why is everyone in uproar about Shedeur? He posted, suggesting such slides happen regularly. However, not everyone in the quarterback fraternity was throwing analytical critiques around. Derek Carr. Former Pro Bowl quarterback Derek Carr stepped into his analyst role and delivered some pointed criticism that had Cleveland Browns fans scratching their heads. On August 23, 2025, during the Browns' preseason finale against the Los Angeles Rams, Carr was watching live as Shedeur Sanders got benched with just over 2 minutes remaining and Cleveland trailing 17-16. What should have been Sanders' moment to shine in a clutch 2-minute drill was instead handed to Tyler Huntley, a move that had Carr immediately questioning the decision on social media. "I need to understand why we don't get to see it, Shedeur Sanders run this 2-minute drill. Wouldn't you want to see your young QB operate in this situation?" Carr posted in real time, his frustration evident. The former Raiders and Saints signal caller made a compelling point. Here was Sanders, buried as the 4th-string quarterback, getting what might be his last opportunity for meaningful reps all season, and Cleveland pulled the plug right when the lights got brightest. When fans pointed out Sanders' struggles in the game, completing just 3 of 6 passes for 14 yards while taking 5 sacks, Carr acknowledged the performance but emphasized the bigger picture. "I can understand that, but this is potentially, you never know, his last time at reps all year," he responded, highlighting the developmental importance of high-pressure situations for young quarterbacks. While Carr was questioning coaching decisions, another quarterback was dealing with his own Sanders-related controversy: Malik Neighbors. New York Giants star receiver Malik Neighbors unleashed one of the most passionate defenses of Shedeur Sanders you'll ever hear, and he wasn't holding back any punches when it came to criticizing the NFL's treatment of his friend. During a February 2025 interview on SiriusXM NFL Radio, Neighbors laid out exactly why he thought Sanders was special. "I've been watching him a long time. He has another crazy arm talent. He gives his guys the opportunity to go make plays. He's not scared and he wants to win, and he's a leader," Neighbors said, his admiration clear as day. But it was after Sanders' shocking draft slide that Neighbors really let his feelings be known. Appearing on the 7 p.m. in Brooklyn podcast with Carmelo Anthony in May 2025, Neighbors went scorched earth on the entire league. "You don't do something like that to somebody like that. You can't knock his talent. I heard a lot of things about he takes unnecessary sacks. He had a bad O-line. He threw 70% with a bad O-line." Neighbors fired back at critics, defending Sanders' college performance behind Colorado's porous offensive line. He wasn't finished though, launching into a cultural critique that had everyone talking. "We gotta stop making feelings with how people play linger. Yeah, he might have some things that he might say on camera off the field that don't have to do with how he plays football. How he carries himself is all about how his dad raised him." The Giants receiver made it personal, arguing that Sanders was being punished for his authentic personality rather than evaluated purely on football merit. His emotional plea resonated with fans who saw Sanders' slide as unfair treatment of a talented player. Another quarterback who experienced the pre-draft hype alongside Sanders had his own perspective on the situation: Cam Ward. Miami Dolphins quarterback Cam Ward, the #1 overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, shared a unique perspective on Shedeur Sanders' journey, one that came from their friendship forged during months of pre-draft workouts and shared expectations. During Super Bowl week in February 2025, Ward addressed the media's attempts to create a rivalry between the two top quarterback prospects. "It's cool that we're close because if we weren't, the media would try to pin us against each other. We've been working out together, pushing each other. I'm not trying to compete against him in that way. It's about us both getting better," Ward explained, showing the genuine respect between the two signal callers. When Sanders' draft slide became reality, Ward didn't hesitate to defend his friend during his introductory press conference with the Titans on April 25th, 2025. "It is surprising because he's a good quarterback. He doesn't get a lot of the credit that he deserves, especially the plays that he made in Colorado," Ward said, his disappointment evident. The former Miami Hurricane revealed just how close their pre-draft relationship had been. "We thought me and him were going 1 and 2. He was one of the better QBs in the draft." Even months later, as both quarterbacks settled into their respective NFL situations, Ward maintained his support. In an August 2025 interview, he reiterated, "I don't have a rivalry with him. That's my boy. He's been productive wherever he has been every time. When he gets his chance, I know he's going to make the most of it." Ward's consistent backing of Sanders throughout the process showed the genuine friendship between two young quarterbacks navigating the pressures of NFL expectations. While Ward showed unwavering loyalty, one former All-Pro defensive back became Sanders' most vocal media defender, Richard Sherman. Former Seattle Seahawks All-Pro cornerback Richard Sherman emerged as one of Shedeur Sanders' most passionate advocates, and his defense of the young quarterback was both technically sound and emotionally charged. When Sanders' draft slide became reality, Sherman didn't mince words on his podcast. "It's crazy to me that Shedeur Sanders is still on the board. This kid's tape at Colorado was phenomenal. He's got the arm talent, the poise, the decision-making. I don't get why teams are passing on him," Sherman said during the first round, his frustration building as Sanders continued to fall. But it was after Sanders' preseason debut that Sherman really let his analytical skills shine. Following the rookie's impressive performance against the Carolina Panthers, 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns, Sherman took to social media to celebrate. "Wow, at Shedeur Sanders, what a throw. Dime," he posted, highlighting specific throws that caught his defensive eye. Sherman wasn't content to just praise the performance, though. He had bigger issues to address about the treatment Sanders received. "I got a lot of respect for Hash 12. The guy is balling. I don't understand the weird hate Hash 12 gets and that everything matters. It's like they don't want him to succeed," Sherman wrote, calling out what he saw as unfair scrutiny. He even drew comparisons to other rookie quarterbacks, arguing that if Giants first-rounder Jackson Dart had performed similarly, the reaction would have been completely different. When Sanders struggled in his final preseason game against the Rams, Sherman provided context while acknowledging the issues. "Shedeur had a rough one against the Rams, no doubt. 5 sacks, that's not all on him. O-line was a mess. But he's got to learn to get rid of the ball faster. That's coachable." Sherman's technical analysis carried weight, but another former NFL quarterback brought a different perspective to Sanders' development. Dan Orlovsky. ESPN analyst and former NFL quarterback Dan Orlovsky provided some of the most detailed and balanced analysis of Shedeur Sanders, combining praise for his talent with honest critiques of areas needing improvement. Back in March 2025, when Sanders was still projected as a potential top 5 pick, Orlovsky defended him against early criticism. "The tape doesn't lie. Those who think Shedeur Sanders can't play are nuts," he said, showcasing film from Colorado's game against Baylor, where Sanders threw for 341 yards despite playing behind a collapsing pocket. Orlovsky argued that most of Sanders' struggles were due to poor offensive line play and inconsistent receiver routes, not the quarterback's decision-making. When Sanders' draft slide began, Orlovsky urged patience and perspective. "Can we stop having the funeral for Shedeur right now? Can we stop? He didn't get drafted in the first round. He might get drafted in the first 5 picks tonight, and candidly, it could be a better situation for him," he argued, suggesting a day 2 selection might actually benefit the young quarterback. Prior to Sanders' preseason debut, Orlovsky also pushed back against the set-up-to-fail narrative. Will everybody stop with the Shedeur Sanders is being set up to fail narrative? Who do you want to start the game? He asked, logically explaining why Sanders got the start due to injuries to other quarterbacks. After Sanders' impressive debut, Orlovsky was full of praise, appearing on the Pat McAfee show to highlight the performance. "Shedeur Sanders looked comfortable in and out of the huddle. He was pretty aggressive with the football and he played with a lot of confidence. The operation was clean and the decision-making was spot on." However, following Sanders' struggles against the Rams, Orlovsky provided specific technical criticism about persistent issues from college. Orlovsky's balanced approach stood in contrast to another former NFL linebacker who took a much more confrontational stance, Emmanuel Acho. Former NFL linebacker Emmanuel Acho rode an emotional roller coaster when it came to his evaluation of Shedeur Sanders, swinging from defense to criticism and back to praise as the 2025 season unfolded. Early in the pre-draft process, Acho emerged as one of Sanders' strongest defenders against anonymous coaching criticism. When reports surfaced of Sanders being called arrogant and brash in combine interviews, Acho fired back on FS1's The Facility. I think Shedeur Sanders' security makes a lot of people insecure. So when Shedeur Sanders comes off as confident, comes off as secure, comes off as knowing who he is, you, insecure, dictate his security as something that's an issue, Acho argued, framing Sanders' confidence as a strength rather than a weakness. He drew parallels to Deion Sanders' own bold approach during his 1989 draft process, suggesting the apple didn't fall far from the tree. However, as the draft approached, Acho began raising concerns about Sanders' physical tools. Shedeur Sanders, his arm, I got questions about the strength. Travis Hunter would have people beat and he's waiting for it, Acho said in April, questioning Sanders' arm strength and timing on deep passes. When Sanders' slide became reality, Acho's emotions boiled over. Shedeur Sanders not getting drafted in the first 3 rounds? It's disgusting, he declared, arguing that being selected in the 5th round significantly hurt Sanders' career opportunities. He even suggested Sanders consider returning to college rather than accepting a backup role. But after Sanders' impressive preseason debut, Acho appeared to change his tune once again, posting on social media. If anybody doubts that Shedeur Sanders' game will translate to the NFL, just show them this and shush him up. While Acho was flip-flopping on his Sanders takes, another former NFL star maintained consistent support throughout, LaShawn McCoy. Two-time Super Bowl champion LaShawn McCoy became one of Shedeur Sanders' most vocal supporters, and his confidence in the young quarterback never wavered despite the 5th-round selection. From the moment anonymous coaches started criticizing Sanders during the pre-draft process, McCoy was having none of it. You have a kid who's been successful everywhere he's been, and now you're nitpicking because he's confident? That's what you want in a quarterback, McCoy argued alongside James Jones, dismissing the critics as jealous of Sanders' swagger. When Sanders impressed during the Browns' rookie minicamp in May 2025, McCoy revealed he had inside sources feeding him information. I got my sources, and they told me that he looks like the best player out of the whole camp, and he's a 5th rounder, McCoy claimed, suggesting Sanders was outperforming the other quarterbacks despite his low draft position. The former Eagles running back made a bold prediction that had Browns fans buzzing. If you look at Shedeur Sanders, his mindset ain't to be in no backup role with the Browns. He's in there to start. He's going to take some time, but he's going to start, and he's going to start early this year. McCoy didn't stop there, making perhaps the most audacious comparison possible by linking Sanders to Tom Brady. You've seen his work ethic. Everything that we heard about him is not true. Don't let the jewelry and the music and the swagger fool you. He's a hard worker. The first thing that the head coach said, hey, he's the first one in the building and the last one to leave. Sounds like someone else I know. His name is Brady, McCoy proclaimed, referencing his former Tampa Bay teammates' legendary work ethic. McCoy continued his advocacy throughout the summer, even defending Sanders against minor controversies like speeding tickets. McCoy's unwavering support contrasted sharply with another former NFL veteran who took a more critical analytical approach, Mark Schlereth. 3-time Super Bowl champion Mark Schlereth brought his offensive line expertise to bear on Shedeur Sanders, offering both defense and criticism that reflected his understanding of quarterback protection and pocket dynamics. Early in the pre-draft process, Schlereth stood firmly in Sanders' corner when anonymous coaches began attacking his confidence. A lot of draft evaluators are stupid. Show me a quarterback who's not. Arrogant. Ever sit with a guy who's going to be a star quarterback? Most of them are arrogant. Most of them have a lot of belief in what they do, Schlereth argued on FS1's Breakfast Ball, suggesting that confidence was a prerequisite for elite quarterback play. However, after Sanders' draft slide became reality, Schlereth provided a more nuanced explanation for why it happened. From the talent perspective, he's not a generational talent, so you better ace the intangibles part of the process. And by all accounts, he did not ace the intangible aspect of it, he explained, acknowledging Sanders' talent while recognizing the importance of pre-draft interviews and character evaluation. Schlereth's analysis became particularly pointed when discussing Sanders' preseason struggles, drawing on his personal experience as a Colorado radio analyst during Sanders' college career. When I was coaching up there, I even pulled Dean aside and said, dude, what you're asking guys to do is impossible, Schlereth revealed, referencing conversations he'd had about Colorado's offensive line struggles. He acknowledged the impossible situation Sanders faced in college, but emphasized that pocket presence remained a legitimate concern. His pocket presence is an issue. He holds the ball too long, and that's something he's got to work on. You saw it in the Rams game. 5 sacks, and a lot of it was on him trying to make something happen instead of getting rid of it, Schlereth critiqued, balancing context with accountability. His analysis highlighted the complex reality that while Sanders faced challenging circumstances, he still needed to adapt his decision-making for NFL success. Schlereth's technical critique resonated with another former player who became an advocate for Sanders throughout the process, Keyshawn Johnson. Former #1 overall pick Keyshawn Johnson brought a unique perspective to the Shedeur Sanders discussion, having experienced both the pressures of high draft expectations and the realities of NFL quarterback evaluation. Johnson's support for Sanders began even before the draft, when he defended Deion Sanders' intention to influence his son's destination. That's good. He should step in. He shouldn't surrender any, I don't want to call it power, but advice to anyone, Johnson argued in November 2024, comparing Deion's approach to Eli Manning's successful draft demand in 2004. When pre-draft criticism mounted against Sanders, Johnson provided a cultural analysis that cut to the heart of the issue. You get these coaches that are not accustomed to dealing with or having these conversations with individuals at this position that have a certain snap, crackle, pop to them, Johnson explained on FS1 Speak, suggesting that some evaluators were uncomfortable with Sanders' authentic personality because it didn't fit their traditional quarterback mold. Johnson's confidence in Sanders never wavered, even making bold predictions about his NFL trajectory. You know, the crazy thing is, I am confident it's going to be Shedeur. I don't know when. I don't know if it's the start of the season or 3, 4, 5 games into the season, but before they get to the midseason mark, he's going to be the starting quarterback, Johnson predicted in May 2025, following Sanders' impressive minicamp performance. When Sanders delivered in his preseason debut, Johnson was vindicated in his assessment. Shedeur Sanders showed why he's a first-round talent in that Panthers game. 14 of 23, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's not a fluke, he declared, emphasizing that Sanders' performance proved his draft slide was misguided. Even when Sanders struggled in his final preseason game, Johnson provided context and maintained his support, attributing the poor showing to offensive line issues and injury concerns rather than fundamental flaws in Sanders' game. Johnson's unwavering faith in Sanders was shared by another Hall of Fame quarterback who understood the challenges of overcoming draft adversity, Kurt Warner. Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner, who famously went undrafted before leading the St. Louis Rams to a Super Bowl championship, brought a unique perspective to Shedeur Sanders' evaluation that combined technical analysis with empathy for late-round selections. Warner's initial assessment of Sanders was overwhelmingly positive, focusing on what he considered the young quarterback's greatest strength. Shedeur may throw the best ball, and what I mean by that is the most catchable, the most accurate ball of all these guys. I love that he can pace the ball. He never throws it hard. He never has to throw through you, Warner praised during a March 2025 appearance on the Joel Klatt Show, highlighting Sanders' touch and accuracy as elite traits. However, Warner also identified areas of concern from his film study, particularly regarding Sanders' pocket presence in challenging situations. I watched some of his tape from the beginning of the year, and I watched the last 4 games. I felt in the last 4 games, Shedeur was very uneasy in the pocket, Warner noted, pointing to specific games where Sanders struggled behind Colorado's struggling offensive line. When Sanders' draft slide became reality, Warner was adamant that the evaluation was wrong. My evaluation was he's the most accurate quarterback I thought in this draft. I really like Shedeur. He wasn't a 5th-round prospect in my opinion, Warner declared on the Jim Rome Show in May 2025, rejecting the notion that Sanders deserved to fall so far. Warner's analysis emphasized Sanders' role as a game winner at both Jackson State and Colorado, arguing that his ability to carry teams through critical moments was being undervalued. During Sanders' preseason struggles, Warner expressed frustration with the Browns' handling of the competition between Sanders and Dillon Gabriel. I was really looking forward to the competition between Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders in last preseason game. A bummer that both didn't have the same ops to make plays. Warner posted on social media, suggesting that unequal opportunities made fair evaluation impossible. While Warner focused on technical analysis and development, one Hall of Famer delivered a scathing indictment of Sanders' entire pre-draft approach. Chris Carter. Speaking on the Fully Loaded podcast on April 28, 2025, Carter didn't just question Sanders' football ability. He attacked everything from his interview style to his fashion choices during the most important job interview of his life. You're going for a job interview. So for his job interview, he was so concerned about what his outfit was, his necklace was over $100 grand, Carter began, his disgust evident as he described Sanders' priorities during combine interviews. Carter's breakdown of Sanders' pre-draft failures was methodical and brutal, listing every misstep that cost him millions of dollars. Not working out at the combine, that wasn't the right thing. His interview process, obviously, he could have done a lot better than that. A lot of people left meetings feeling he was very, very entitled, Carter cataloged, building his case that Sanders had sabotaged his own draft stock. But Carter wasn't finished. He dismissed conspiracy theories about NFL collusion while delivering his most damaging assessment of Sanders' physical tools. He doesn't have a big-time arm. He's not a big guy. He's not overly athletic. He doesn't have superstar qualities, Carter declared, arguing that Sanders lacked the exceptional traits that would justify overlooking character concerns. Carter's final verdict was as harsh as it was direct, estimating that Sanders and his family's approach cost him between $30 and $50 million in guaranteed money. Carter concluded, suggesting that the draft slide served as a necessary reality check for both father and son. His critique extended beyond football to Sanders' overall brand and marketing approach, arguing that the media attention and flashy lifestyle that helped him in college actually hurt his NFL prospects. Carter's devastating critique represented the harshest end of NFL opinion on Sanders, painting a picture of a talented but misguided young quarterback whose own decisions derailed what should have been a lucrative draft experience. Thank you for staying tuned. To enjoy more of such videos, do click on the card showing on the screen. For years, Tom Brady and Shedeur Sanders sold the picture-perfect mentor-mentee bond.
A couple years ago, he extended his hand. He was like, come work out with me in Tampa. So he flew down there. Dad came. We rode with him. He took me in his truck, his high school film.
But behind the smiles, Brady secretly couldn't stand him. And now he's finally revealed the shocking reason why. Let me break it down. The mentor who became the betrayer. The relationship between Tom Brady and Shedeur Sanders was painted as a storybook mentorship, arguably the greatest quarterback of all time guiding the son of his former teammate toward NFL greatness. But reality turned out far different. To understand how things soured, we need to rewind to their beginnings. It all started in the summer of 2020, when a young Shedeur Sanders was already making waves as a high school quarterback at Trinity Christian School in Cedar Hill, Texas. At just 18 years old, Sanders was already carrying the weight of enormous expectations as the son of NFL Hall of Famer Deion Primetime Sanders. It was during this pivotal moment in his development that Tom Brady extended what seemed like a generous offer, an invitation to train together at Berkeley Preparatory School in Tampa, Florida.
A couple years ago, he extended his hand. He was like, come work out with me in Tampa. So he flew down there. Dad came. We rode with him. He took me in his truck, his high school film. Then from then on, he was just telling me knowledge, and I filmed everything. I recorded everything. So now sometimes I go back and just listen to the things that he said at that time, and it registers.
The workout session that took place on June 13th, 2020 was meticulously documented and would later become the foundation of what many believed was a genuine mentorship. Brady, who was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the time, positioned himself as the veteran quarterback willing to share his wisdom with the next generation. But here's where the story takes its first sinister turn. What appeared to be Brady's altruistic gesture was actually the beginning of an elaborate long-term strategy to gain unprecedented access to and influence over one of the most promising quarterback prospects in the nation. Shedeur described it as an opportunity to soak up all the knowledge from Brady, whom he referred to as the GOAT, greatest of all time. The young quarterback was completely unaware that he was being systematically groomed for what would become one of the most devastating betrayals in recent NFL history. Shedeur filmed the entire session, including Brady's advice, and has since used the recordings as a reference for his development, creating a documentary record of Brady's involvement that would prove crucial in understanding the depth of his manipulation. Deion Sanders, protective father that he was, couldn't have been more grateful for Brady's apparent investment in his son's future. He expressed his appreciation on Instagram, stating, "There are things in life. Even the father can't teach the son, but God always provides a way if there's a will. At Tom Brady, I thank you, appreciate and love the man, the father and the athlete you are." Brady's response seemed equally heartfelt as he commented on Shedeur's social media post saying, "You will determine what your future holds. I'm always here for you." But the mask began to slip during a September 2023 appearance on Brady's Let's Go podcast. When Deion brought up his son's luxury lifestyle, asking Brady about Shedeur's Rolls-Royce Cullinan purchase, Brady's response revealed his true feelings about the young quarterback's character and priorities.
Tom, do you think a college kid needs a phantom, like a roll?
I think he needs to get in the film room and spend as much time in there as possible. And less time in the car and more time in the film room.
This moment was telling. Brady wasn't just offering constructive criticism. He was publicly humiliating a young man who had trusted him with his career development. The contempt in Brady's voice was unmistakable, and it marked the beginning of a pattern of behavior that would ultimately culminate in one of the most shocking draft betrayals in NFL history. The public narrative that emerged from their initial 2020 encounter had painted Brady as the consummate professional and mentor. Sports media outlets celebrated the story as a heartwarming example of veteran leadership and generational knowledge transfer. But what they missed was the strategic nature of Brady's involvement. By establishing himself as Shedeur's mentor at such a critical juncture in the young quarterback's development, Brady was creating a relationship dynamic that would give him significant influence over Sanders' career trajectory for years to come. As Shedeur progressed through his college career, first at Jackson State University and later at the University of Colorado, Brady's involvement only deepened. The Tampa World workout marked the beginning of a mentor-mentee relationship, where Shedeur stated that he regularly communicates with Brady, including post-game discussions after college games. The relationship appeared to be thriving, with Brady even signing Sanders to a groundbreaking name, image, and likeness (NIL) deal with his Brady brand apparel company in 2022. Brady praised Sanders extensively, stating, "Shedeur Sanders is the perfect ambassador for Brady. He embodies everything we look for in a Brady athlete, and his character and values align perfectly with our brand." Meanwhile, Sanders expressed enthusiasm for the partnership, noting, "Tom has been a longtime mentor to me, both on and off the field, and I've been a fan of his apparel brand since its inception." But beneath this veneer of mutual admiration and business partnership, Brady was carefully studying Sanders' game, identifying his weaknesses and forming judgments that would later prove devastating to the young quarterback's professional aspirations. The 2022 NIL deal wasn't just a business transaction. It was Brady's way of maintaining close surveillance over Sanders' development while positioning himself to have maximum impact on his future NFL prospects. During Sanders' time at Colorado, Brady continued his public support while privately harboring growing reservations about the quarterback's ability to succeed at the professional level. Brady has publicly praised Shedeur's work ethic, preparation, accuracy, poise in the pocket, and resilience.
Working with Tom, it was just talking to him and understanding, okay, how to improve each week. He texts me after the game, "Don't be satisfied." Like, it's cool. So it was cool hearing from him, knowing he's still watching and stuff like that. But
this revealed the extent of Brady's involvement in Sanders' week-to-week performance. But what Shedeur interpreted as encouragement and mentorship was actually Brady conducting detailed scouting reports on his protege, gathering intelligence that would later be used against him in the most consequential moment of his career. The relationship continued to evolve as Brady transitioned from active player to minority owner of the Las Vegas Raiders in 2024. Brady became a minority owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, acquiring a 5% stake in the franchise after NFL owners unanimously approved the deal during a league meeting in Atlanta. This new role would prove to be the crucial piece in Brady's elaborate scheme to derail Sanders' NFL dreams. Raiders owner Mark Davis expressed enthusiasm about Brady's potential contributions, particularly in the realm of football operations. Davis made several public statements in late 2024, indicating that Brady would have a significant voice in the Raiders' quarterback selection process, describing it as a huge benefit for the organization. The stage was now set for Brady's ultimate betrayal. He had spent 4 years building Sanders' trust, studying his game, identifying his weaknesses, and positioning himself as the key decision maker for the NFL team that everyone expected would draft his supposed protege. What happened next would shock the football world and reveal the true extent of Tom Brady's capacity for calculated deception, the draft day sabotage. The 2025 NFL Draft was supposed to be Shedeur Sanders' moment of triumph after a spectacular college career that saw him throw for over 14,000 yards with a 70.1% completion rate. Sanders was widely projected as a potential top 5 pick. Mock drafts from respected analysts consistently had him going to quarterback-needy teams, with many specifically projecting him to the Las Vegas Raiders, the team where his mentor Tom Brady now held significant influence as a minority owner. But as draft day approached, a sinister plot was already in motion. Brady, who had spent years positioning himself as Sanders' trusted advisor and mentor, was preparing to deliver the ultimate betrayal. The man who had promised to always be there for Shedeur was about to orchestrate one of the most shocking draft slides in NFL history. The first signs of trouble emerged during Sanders' pre-draft process. Reports surfaced that Sanders' pre-draft interviews were perceived poorly by some NFL teams, with former NFL quarterback Brady Quinn describing Sanders' interview process as an absolute disaster, alleging he wore headphones, answered FaceTime calls during meetings, and appeared unprepared. But what the public didn't know was that Brady was actively working behind the scenes, using his influence and insider knowledge to poison the well against his supposed protege. ESPN's Pete Thamel reported that multiple teams questioned Sanders' athleticism and ability to translate his college performance to the NFL, with scouts noting he was a mediocre athlete who lacked sufficient film showing him throwing in rhythm. While these concerns may have had some legitimate basis, Brady's fingerprints were all over the narrative that emerged. He had been studying Sanders' game for years and knew exactly which criticisms would resonate most with NFL decision makers. The Raiders, who were widely expected to select Sanders, had multiple opportunities to draft him. The team passed on Sanders 7 times before he was finally selected by Cleveland in the 5th round. This wasn't an accident or oversight. This was the result of Brady's systematic campaign to ensure that Sanders would not end up in Las Vegas, despite years of leading both Sanders and his father to believe otherwise. The extent of Brady's influence within the Raiders organization had been well established in the months leading up to the draft. Raiders owner Mark Davis had stated that Brady would have a huge voice in picking the Raiders' next franchise quarterback, emphasizing that Davis had been seeking someone to oversee the football division and believed Brady could fill that role. NFL Network. Insider Ian Rappaport had reported that Davis told him Brady would have significant input in quarterback decisions. Given this level of influence and Brady's years-long relationship with Sanders, the Raiders' decision to repeatedly pass on the quarterback becomes even more damaging. This wasn't simply a team deciding that Sanders wasn't the right fit. This was Brady using his position of trust and authority to actively sabotage the career of a young man who had considered him a mentor and father figure. The betrayal was so shocking that even media personalities who had followed the story closely were left stunned. Skip Bayless, the controversial sports analyst, was among the first to call out what he saw as Brady's duplicity. On April 26, 2025, during the NFL draft, Bayless posted on X, "It is now pretty clear Tom Brady, who mentored Shedeur, told the Raiders not to take Shedeur." Duly noted. Bayless didn't stop there. He doubled down on his accusations, tweeting, "How could Tom Brady's team pass on Shedeur again and again and again? Brady reportedly coached Shedeur. Brady reportedly was involved in Raiders draft decision-making." The frustration and disbelief in Bayless's posts reflected what many in the football community were thinking. How could Brady, who had mentored Sanders for years, allow his team to pass on him 7 times? But the most damaging revelation came when Brady attempted to distance himself from the Raiders draft decision. When questioned about Sanders' slide on the Impulsive podcast, Brady claimed he wasn't part of any evaluation process for Sanders. This statement was not just misleading, it was a calculated lie designed to protect Brady's reputation while throwing Sanders under the bus.
We're talking about going late in the draft. Elephant in the room, Shedeur Sanders. What happened, Tom? Why did he go so late in the draft?
It's a good question. I wasn't a part of any evaluation process or to
Skip Bayless
see
says
that.
otherwise.
No, well.
The disingenuousness of Brady's response becomes even more apparent when we examine the contradictory evidence. NFL media's Ian Rappaport had quoted Raiders owner Mark Davis saying Brady would have a huge voice in quarterback decisions. The Raiders' decision to bypass Sanders, despite Brady's mentorship, suggests either a strategic choice to prioritize other players or a deliberate effort by Brady to distance himself from Sanders despite their 4-year relationship. The pattern of Brady's deception becomes even clearer when we examine what happened after Sanders' devastating slide. Instead of taking responsibility for his role in the debacle, Brady attempted to position himself as a supportive mentor reaching out to console his former protege. But even this gesture was tainted by insincerity and self-serving motivation.
I actually texted Shedeur because I know him very well. And I said, dude, like whatever happens, wherever you go, like that's your first day. Day 2 matters more than the draft. I was 199.
Yeah.
So who could speak on it better than me? Like what that really means. Use it as motivation. You're going to get your chances.
The hollow nature of Brady's post-draft outreach becomes apparent when viewed in the context of his actions. Here was a man who had just orchestrated the systematic destruction of Sanders' draft stock, now attempting to position himself as the wise mentor, offering comfort and guidance. The text message Brady sent to Sanders, advising him that day 2 matters more than the draft and to use it as motivation, reads like a masterclass in gaslighting. Brady's reference to his own draft experience as the 199th pick was particularly cynical. While Brady's late selection had indeed motivated him to greatness, the circumstances were entirely different. Brady wasn't sabotaged by a trusted mentor. He was simply overlooked by teams who failed to recognize his potential. Sanders, on the other hand, was the victim of a calculated campaign by someone who knew his game better than anyone and used that knowledge to destroy his prospects. The depth of Brady's betrayal becomes even more apparent when we consider the timing and methodology of his sabotage. Brady had been studying Sanders' game for years, identifying his weaknesses and forming judgments that would later prove devastating to the young quarterback's professional aspirations. The 2022 NIL deal with Brady Brand wasn't just a business transaction. It was a way for Brady to maintain surveillance over Sanders' development while positioning himself to have maximum impact on his future NFL prospects. Throughout Sanders' time at Colorado, Brady continued his public support while privately harboring growing reservations about the quarterback's ability to succeed at the professional level. The mentorship extended beyond technical advice to life lessons, with Brady offering guidance on everything from film study to financial decisions. Browns. But this comprehensive involvement wasn't born from genuine care. It was strategic intelligence gathering that would later be weaponized against Sanders. The most damaging aspect of Brady's betrayal was how he used Sanders' trust against him. Sanders has frequently cited Brady as a resource he could call upon with questions about the game, emphasizing Brady's ability to relate due to his own experience at the highest level. Every conversation, every piece of advice, every moment of supposed mentorship was actually Brady gathering ammunition for his eventual sabotage. The systematic nature of Brady's campaign becomes clear when we examine the specific criticisms that emerged about Sanders during the draft process. Reports surfaced about Sanders' perceived arrogance, his tendency to take unnecessary sacks, and concerns about his hero ball tendencies. These weren't random observations from scouts. They were carefully crafted talking points that Brady, with his intimate knowledge of Sanders' game, knew would resonate with NFL decision-makers. The Raiders' eventual selection of other players, including running back Ashton Jeanty in the first round and quarterback Cam Miller from North Dakota State in the 6th round, wasn't just a preference for different players. It was the result of Brady's systematic character assassination of Sanders within the organization. As Sanders watched his draft stock plummet in real time, he couldn't have known that the man he trusted most in football was the architect of his destruction. The young quarterback who had filmed every session with Brady, who had treasured every piece of advice, who had proudly worn the Brady brand, was being systematically destroyed by his supposed mentor. The betrayal was complete when Sanders finally received that text from Brady on draft night. The man who had orchestrated the most devastating night of Sanders' professional life was now positioning himself as the consoling mentor, offering wisdom about overcoming adversity. It was a final cruel twist of the knife. Brady not only destroyed Sanders' dreams, but then attempted to position himself as the source of comfort and guidance for the very pain he had caused. Brady's true motives revealed. The aftermath of Shedeur Sanders' devastating draft slide revealed the true extent of Tom Brady's calculated betrayal, but it also exposed the deeper, more disturbing motives behind his systematic sabotage of a young quarterback who had trusted him implicitly. As the dust settled and Sanders began his professional journey with the Cleveland Browns, new evidence emerged that painted an even darker picture of Brady's duplicitous behavior and the psychological warfare he had waged against his supposed protege. The immediate aftermath of the draft saw Brady attempting to control the narrative through a carefully orchestrated public relations campaign. His appearance on the Impulsive podcast wasn't just damage control, it was a masterclass in deflection and gaslighting that revealed the true depths of his deception.
I actually texted Shedeur because I know him very well. And I said, dude, like whatever happens, wherever you go, like that's your first day. Day 2 matters more than the draft. I was 199.
Yeah.
So who could speak on it better than me? Like what that really means. Use it as motivation. You're going to get your chances.
But Brady's attempt to position himself as the wise counselor fell apart under closer scrutiny. Skip Bayless, who had initially called out Brady's role in Sanders' slide, wasn't satisfied with Brady's weak denials. On May 9th, 2025, Bayless escalated the feud in a 25-minute rant titled, "I Call BS on Tom Brady" on his X account, accusing Brady of taking the cowardly way out by not directly addressing him and insisting that Brady's denial was disingenuous.
Tom Brady has called me out. I guess he's called me a liar. So I'm about to call BS on Tom Brady because Tom, you know and I know everything I said about you and Shedeur Sanders is obviously exactly right.
Bayless didn't just challenge Brady's version of events, he systematically dismantled it with facts that Brady couldn't dispute. Bayless claimed, "You obviously just didn't believe in this kid and you should own that," highlighting the contradiction between Brady's claimed non-involvement and his documented influence within the Raiders organization. The evidence supporting Bayless's accusations was overwhelming.
So, soon after Pete Carroll took over as Raiders coach, he said, "We're going to build this team up around the quarterback position, and we're going to lean on Tom as much as we possibly can." Smart. Then there was this from the new Raiders general manager, John Spytek, who said, "When we are looking at a quarterback, we'd be a fool not to involve Tom."
These weren't casual comments. They were explicit acknowledgments of Brady's central role in the Raiders' quarterback evaluation process. The most damning evidence came when Bayless revealed the depth of Brady's knowledge about Sanders and the impossibility of his claimed non-involvement. Bayless noted that Sanders became the most debatable player by far in this draft, and that nobody out there, outside of Shedeur's family, knows his game and his nature, his tangibles and his intangibles better than Tom Brady. The idea that the Raiders would make quarterback decisions without consulting their minority minority owner, who happened to be the greatest quarterback of all time and Sanders' mentor, was not just implausible, it was insulting to anyone's intelligence.
I considered it a strength of Shedeur's that since he was in high school, it may go back before that, you'd know this better than I would, Tom. Tom Brady mentored and coached Shedeur Sanders all the way up through high school and into college and through college. Mentored and coached. Nobody out there outside of Shedeur's family knows his game and his nature, his tangibles and his intangibles better than Tom Brady.
But Brady's betrayal extended beyond simply failing to advocate for Sanders. He had actively worked to undermine him. The evidence suggests that Brady used his intimate knowledge of Sanders' game, personality, and weaknesses to systematically poison the well against him throughout the NFL. The Raiders would have been fools if they didn't ask Brady his opinion of Shedeur. And obviously, as Bayless was about to detail, Brady said no to Shedeur.
But my point is, at no point, neither Pete Carroll, nor John Spytek, nor Mark Davis said, hey, Tom, give us your take on Shedeur. Stop it, Tom. Quit lying to us, Tom. Quit dodging the truth, Tom. I'm just gonna say it. I'm calling bullshit on you because that's utter bullshit.
The psychological warfare that Brady had waged against Sanders became even clearer when we examined the specific nature of the criticisms that emerged during the draft process. Reports of Sanders being brash and arrogant in team interviews, his perceived entitlement, and concerns about his character weren't random observations. They were carefully crafted character assassinations that Brady, with his years of intimate access to Sanders, was uniquely positioned to orchestrate. The most chilling aspect of Brady's campaign was how he used Sanders' own trust and openness against him. Every conversation Sanders had shared, every vulnerability he had revealed, every moment of genuine connection between mentor and protege had been weaponized by Brady in his systematic destruction of the young quarterback's prospects. Even more disturbing was the revelation of Brady's true motivations for this elaborate betrayal. The evidence suggests that Brady's actions weren't born from genuine concerns about Sanders' NFL readiness, but from deeper, more personal reasons that painted the 7-time Super Bowl champion in an incredibly unflattering light. Content creators and analysts who had followed the story closely began to piece together a pattern of behavior that suggested Brady's animosity towards Sanders wasn't professional, it was personal. One content creator, DJ Bless One, who had been tracking the story, noted the systematic nature of Brady's betrayal and questioned whether it was driven by factors beyond football evaluation.
Tom Brady is a Hall of Famer. He is absolutely one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but he's a piece of human being, man, in every single way.
The harsh assessment from DJ Bless One reflected a growing sentiment among those who had watched Brady's systematic destruction of Sanders' draft stock. The pattern of Brady's deception became even more apparent when the Raiders later acquired Kenny Pickett from the Cleveland Browns in a trade. The move brought renewed focus to Brady's past comments about Pickett during a 2022 game, when Brady was caught on a sideline microphone saying, "I didn't leave my wife and kids to be losing to Kenny fucking Pickett at the half." The irony of Brady's team now acquiring a quarterback he had once disparaged while passing on Sanders, whom he had supposedly mentored, wasn't lost on observers.
Tom Brady had a chance to finally downplay people calling him fake, people saying he used Shedeur just to show he's this good guy that he's not, and he bypassed Shedeur once again. This was absolutely the perfect opportunity to draft Shedeur.
The ultimate proof of Brady's true feelings about Sanders came in the aftermath of the draft. Rather than taking responsibility for his role in Sanders' slide, Brady attempted to maintain his mentor facade while continuing to undermine Sanders behind the scenes. His post-draft text message to Sanders, encouraging him to use the slide as motivation, was the final insult, offering false comfort after secretly working to sabotage Sanders' career. The tragic irony of this situation is that Brady's betrayal of Sanders may have been motivated by legitimate concerns about Sanders' character and work ethic. But rather than addressing these issues directly with his mentee, Brady chose the cowardly path of secret sabotage. Sanders, meanwhile, has been left to pick up the pieces of his shattered draft dreams in Cleveland, wondering how the man he trusted most could have betrayed him so completely. The relationship between Tom Brady and Shedeur Sanders serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of hero worship and the importance of authentic mentorship. Brady's actions revealed that beneath the polished exterior of America's favorite quarterback lies a calculating individual willing to destroy the dreams of someone who trusted him implicitly. The greatest quarterback of all time had become the architect of his protege's downfall, and the football world would never look at Tom Brady the same way again. Found this information exciting and unbelievable? Be sure to check out other similar and amazing videos on the screen. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
I don't concern myself with outside type of things, but I'm committed to his development, just like all of our rookies. So
Shedeur Sanders just wanted reps, but a preseason sideline clash with Browns coach Kevin Stefanski blew up into one of the NFL's most viral controversies. Was it tough coaching or something deeper? The footage tells its own story. Let's break down what really went down. The viral sideline clash. The Cleveland Browns preseason has ignited a storm of controversy, centering on rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders and head coach Kevin Stefanski. What began as a routine rotation of quarterbacks has spiraled into one of the most polarizing discussions of the NFL preseason, fueled by viral footage and reporting. The situation has become a flashpoint, drawing in commentators, former players, and fans who see starkly different realities unfolding in Cleveland. The first flashpoint came late in the Browns preseason finale. Sanders, the 5th-round draft pick and son of NFL legend Deion Sanders, had endured a brutal outing. Just 3 completions on 6 attempts, a meager 14 yards, and 5 sacks. The offense managed only a single first down during its 5 series. Yet when the Browns regained possession with the chance to engineer a final drive, Stefanski pulled Sanders and inserted Tyler Huntley instead. Cameras caught Sanders approaching Stefanski on the sideline, visibly agitated, before being waved off. The moment spread instantly online, sparking accusations of sabotage, favoritism, and a deliberate attempt to stifle Sanders' development. The clip itself was brief but revealing. Asked about Sanders' reaction after being pulled, Stefanski told reporters,
he's a competitive kid. The plan was to go with Snoop there, but I wouldn't make any more of it than that.
His calm dismissal did little to calm the fury brewing outside the locker room. That fury was exemplified in a fiery rant posted immediately after the game. The allegations drew attention because Sanders had already been the subject of controversy during the draft. Analysts such as Mel Kiper Jr. had ranked him as the top quarterback in the class, projecting him as a first-rounder. Instead, he fell to the 5th round, picked 144th overall, a slide that many attributed to off-field perceptions about his personality and the outsized shadow of his father. His fall was described as shameful by critics who believed front offices feared both Sanders' confidence and the potential influence of Deion Sanders. That context has framed every subsequent snap of Sanders' NFL career. When Sanders dazzled in his first preseason outing against Carolina, throwing with poise and accuracy, making plays outside. The pocket, his supporters claimed vindication. When he struggled in later games, his detractors pointed to the very flaws scouts had warned about: holding the ball too long, drifting into pressure, failing to recognize when to throw it away. The Browns' handling of his reps, particularly in comparison to Dillon Gabriel, who was drafted 2 rounds earlier, has become the focal point of the debate. Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner gave voice to the frustration of many neutral observers. He said, "I was really looking forward to the competition between Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders in the last preseason game. Dillon Gabriel played well again, but had good opportunities to make plays. Shedeur Sanders didn't have those same opportunities, so it was hard to make much of an assessment." This discrepancy between opportunity and outcome has fueled the perception that Sanders has been set up to fail. The national debate intensified when Stephen A.Smith addressed the situation on ESPN's First Take. While acknowledging the optics of Stefanski's decision were problematic, Stephen A. rejected the idea of sabotage.
To accuse this man of sabotaging Shedeur Sanders is another thing entirely. I think that's a bit extreme.
He pointed to Sanders' poor performance against 3rd and 4th string defenders, arguing that Stefanski may have been protecting him from further embarrassment. Ryan Clark, however, saw it differently. He insisted that Sanders should have been allowed to finish the game. To Clark, denying Sanders that chance was not sabotage, but still a mishandling of a young player's growth. What has made this controversy so combustible is the collision of competing narratives. On one side, Stefanski defenders argue that the coach, a 2-time NFL Coach of the Year, has earned the benefit of the doubt. They emphasize Sanders' flaws, slow reads, reluctance to throw the ball away, costly sacks, as evidence that his benching was justified. On the other side, Sanders supporters see a pattern of dismissive treatment, beginning with the draft snub and extending to the uneven opportunities afforded in preseason. To them, the viral footage was not an isolated decision, but part of an ongoing marginalization. The imagery of Sanders being waved off by Stefanski crystallized the debate. It symbolized, for critics, a coach unwilling to invest in his development and eager to shield veterans like Joe Flacco from scrutiny. For supporters of Stefanski, it was a pragmatic choice in a game already decided, designed to prevent further damage damage to a rookie already rattled. But for the public, the clips spread online ensured that the narrative of conflict would overshadow all nuance. The Sanders-Stefanski drama had become bigger than football. It was about legacy, perception, opportunity, and power within the NFL. And with the regular season looming, the stakes only grew higher. The most striking element of this unfolding saga is the way perception has overshadowed raw performance. In isolation, a rookie quarterback struggling in preseason is neither unusual nor particularly newsworthy. Across decades, first-year passers have stumbled under the bright lights of the NFL, only to recover and eventually thrive. Yet with Shedeur Sanders, every snap has been magnified, every sideline exchange dissected, every coaching decision scrutinized. That amplification is not simply because of his last name, but because of the broader expectations surrounding him long before he stepped onto a professional field.
The Browns are sabotaging Shedeur Sanders is not only false, it's wildly disrespectful and disingenuous.
For months, analysts had projected Sanders as an elite talent. Draft previews highlighted his arm strength, pocket poise, and leadership qualities, traits developed during his time at Jackson State and Colorado. At Colorado, despite playing behind a porous offensive line that surrendered more than 50 sacks in a single season, Sanders set program records for completions and passing efficiency. Those achievements created the perception of a quarterback capable of transcending his environment. When he fell to the 5th round, critics argued that league decision makers were penalizing him not for talent but for image and association with his father. That narrative created a sense of injustice, priming fans to interpret any negative development in Cleveland as confirmation of systemic bias. The preseason finale provided the perfect storm for these narratives to collide. Sanders' first snap in the second half hinted at promise. A rollout to his right, a well-placed strike to tight end Sal Cannella up the boundary. But Cannella himself was emblematic of the circumstances facing Sanders. A journeyman who had bounced between practice squads and alternative leagues, Cannella was not even listed on the Browns' official depth chart. After that opening play, the supporting cast surrounding Sanders collapsed. Receivers failed to gain separation. Protection broke down repeatedly, and Sanders found himself engulfed by defenders before routes could develop. By the end of his outing, the numbers painted a picture of ineptitude. Yet, context revealed a quarterback operating with the lowest possible margin for success. That context, however, did not soften criticism. In fact, it sharpened it. Commentators framed the decision to pair Sanders with fringe roster players as deliberate marginalization. They argued that the organization sought to suppress his visibility, fearful of the media frenzy that would accompany any sustained success.
That's how it struck me that they threw him in because they didn't want him to make any more splash and put any more heat on Stefanski.
The implication was not incompetence, but orchestration, a conscious choice to set Sanders up to fail rather than to compete on equal footing. The climax came in the game's closing minutes. With the Browns trailing but still possessing the ball, Sanders attempted to re-enter, only for Stefanski to send in Tyler Huntley instead. Cameras captured the moment of confrontation, Sanders visibly incredulous, Stefanski resolute. To neutral observers, it was a coach executing a predetermined plan. The institutional dynamics of the Browns further complicated the story. Ownership, led by Jimmy Haslam, has long been associated with high-profile decisions designed to capture headlines. Critics argued that drafting Sanders was more about publicity than football, pointing to the franchise's troubled recent history and desire to deflect from controversies such as the Deshaun Watson contract. The situation reveals how quickly NFL narratives can transcend the field. A 5th-round rookie's preseason reps should be a minor storyline, yet Sanders' lineage, draft saga, and charismatic presence transformed it into a league-wide talking point, media firestorm, and divided reactions. The firestorm that erupted after Shedeur Sanders' sideline confrontation with Kevin Stefanski did not fade quietly. Instead, it expanded into a league-wide controversy, consuming sports media platforms, talk radio, and online discourse. The incident became more than a question of one player's reps in a preseason finale. It evolved into a referendum on coaching decisions, quarterback development, and the treatment of young talent in the NFL. What elevated this story beyond Cleveland was not simply the footage itself, but the relentless debate it sparked, amplified by commentators and former players who framed the situation in radically different ways. The coach's calm, measured tone stood in stark contrast to the outrage boiling in the media. He acknowledged that Stefanski's choice to bench Sanders before the 2-minute drill could be second-guessed, but rejected the notion that a 2-time Coach of the Year would deliberately undermine a rookie quarterback. For Stephen A., the larger issue was Sanders' performance itself. When you talk about 11 dropbacks, 5 sacks, just 3 completions, 4 3-and-outs, and 5 series, 1 fumble recovered by by a teammate. Those were the numbers. From his perspective, Stefanski may have been protecting Sanders from further embarrassment rather than sabotaging him. Ryan Clark disagreed. While dismissing sabotage accusations as false, he criticized Stefanski for denying Sanders developmental reps.
Part of that development is watching a young quarterback deal with adversity and how does he rebound from it? How does he react? And if you knew that Snoop Huntley wasn't going to be on the team this week, which I'm sure they did, there's no reason to say we need to get him reps.
To Clark, the error was not malicious intent, but short-sighted management. By pulling Sanders, Stefanski robbed him of a crucial opportunity to demonstrate resilience. Dan Orlovsky added another dimension. He argued that the performance issues seen in Sanders' preseason outing were consistent with the critiques from his college film. Orlovsky stressed that while Sanders showed flashes in his earlier preseason appearance against Carolina, he regressed significantly against the Rams. For Orlovsky, the debate over sabotage obscured the real issue. Sanders simply did not play well, and coaches were within their rights to manage him accordingly. This triangulation of opinions, Stephen A. defending Stefanski's integrity, Clark questioning his developmental strategy, Orlovsky emphasizing Sanders' flaws, illustrated the polarized landscape into which the viral footage landed. But what made the debate so combustible was the underlying context of Sanders' draft fall. As Clark noted, many analysts had evaluated Sanders as a late first round or early second round prospect, yet he slid to the 5th round. That slide created an expectation among fans that any team drafting him had secured a steal. The Browns, therefore, were seen as holding a player with far greater potential than his draft slot indicated. When Stefanski treated Sanders as a developmental afterthought rather than a priority project, the dissonance between external expectation and internal reality fueled outrage. Kurt Warner's commentary added credibility to these frustrations. He observed that Dillon Gabriel had been given cleaner opportunities to succeed, while Sanders had been thrust into unfavorable conditions. It was a bummer that neither had the same opportunities to make plays. Dillon Gabriel played well again, but had good opportunities. Shedeur Sanders didn't have those same opportunities, so it was hard to make much of an assessment. Warner stopped short of accusing Stefanski of bias, but underscored the inequities in circumstance that made a direct comparison between quarterbacks misleading. His remarks echoed the complaints of Sanders supporters, who saw the handling of reps as stacked against him. The viral controversy also tapped into long-standing criticisms of Kevin Stefanski's leadership style. Commentators pointed out his history of strained relationships with quarterbacks, most notably Baker Mayfield. In that case, Stefanski was accused of micromanaging and eroding Mayfield's confidence, contributing to his eventual exit from Cleveland. Meanwhile, supporters of Stefanski highlighted his track record of stabilizing the Browns, earning 2 Coach of the Year awards, and navigating constant quarterback turnover. To them, the idea that he would risk his reputation and job security by deliberately sabotaging a 5th-round rookie was implausible. They argued that Sanders' struggles were not evidence of a conspiracy, but confirmation of the league's evaluation that he was a developmental prospect, not an immediate starter. From this perspective, the viral outrage was less about reality and more about the spectacle of a famous name encountering adversity.
It's just excruciating to watch what they're trying to do to Shedeur. Again, they're still trying to teach him a lesson. They sabotaged it. They rigged it against him today, putting him in with 3rd and 4th stringers, 5th stringers.
The question of Deion Sanders' shadow loomed over every discussion. Shedeur's association with his father created both opportunity and burden. As the fiery rant after the preseason finale claimed, many in the league were scared to death that drafting Shedeur might eventually lead to ownership, considering Deion for coaching roles. This fear, according to critics, explained both his draft slide and the reluctance of some coaching staffs to embrace him. Even though Shedeur and Deion had mutually agreed it was time for Shedeur to chart his own path, the perception that he remained tethered to his father's influence persisted. In the context of the Browns, this narrative fed speculation that Stefanski viewed Shedeur not merely as a rookie, but as a potential threat to his authority. The Browns' organizational dynamics compounded these tensions. Jimmy Haslam's reputation for meddling in football operations, coupled with the controversial $230 million guaranteed contract to Deshaun Watson, created an environment where every personnel decision was second-guessed. Some insiders suggested that Sanders' selection may have been ownership-driven rather than a product of Stefanski and general manager Andrew Berry's strategy. If true, that would help explain the lukewarm commitment from the coaching staff, who might have viewed Sanders as an imposed project rather than a chosen one. In that scenario, the preseason finale and the decision to bench Sanders could be interpreted less as sabotage and more as quiet resistance to ownership's interference. Fans who might not have watched a single Browns preseason snap engaged with the controversy through these snippets, forming opinions based not on full context but on a few seconds of video. The incident demonstrated how modern discourse around athletes can be be shaped more by perception and virality than by comprehensive evaluation of performance. For Sanders, the implications were profound. As Stephen A. warned, the Rams game might represent the only NFL action he sees all year.
Here's the sad part about what we saw this weekend. That may be the only time we see Shedeur Sanders on the NFL field this year. That will be our lasting memory, unless all of those dominoes fall, Dan.
If true, then the viral footage would not just be a preseason subplot. It would become the defining image of his rookie campaign. For a player with aspirations of becoming a franchise-altering quarterback, that is a daunting prospect. For Stefanski, the challenge is equally daunting. Even if his decision was rooted in pragmatism, the perception of mishandling a high-profile rookie can linger. In a league where coaches are constantly evaluated not only on wins, but also on player development, the appearance of stunting a promising talent can damage credibility. Already facing skepticism about his ability to maximize offensive potential, Stefanski now finds his name linked to accusations of humiliation and suppression. Whether justified or not, those associations can prove difficult to erase. The broader NFL community is left grappling with uncomfortable questions. What obligation do coaches have to provide equal opportunities to players drafted later than expected? How should franchises balance internal evaluations with external expectations amplified by media and fans? And most critically, to what extent should viral perception shape organizational decision-making? In the case of Sanders and Stefanski, these questions have no easy answers, yet they have become inescapable, dominating preseason discourse and setting the stage for ongoing scrutiny as the regular season unfolds. By the end of the week, the Sanders-Stefanski controversy had transcended Cleveland. It had become a case study in modern sports culture, a collision of legacy, perception, performance, and media amplification. What began as a simple coaching decision in a meaningless preseason game had transformed into a viral spectacle, one that would follow both men long after the final whistle. Future stakes for Sanders, Stefanski, and the Browns. The aftermath of the Sanders-Stefanski confrontation left the NFL community not only debating what had just unfolded, but also speculating about what would come next. Preseason games are typically forgotten within days, yet this incident created ripple effects that will linger throughout the season and potentially beyond. The viral footage, amplified by debate shows, social media discourse, and insider reporting, cemented itself as a pivot point in both Shedeur Sanders' rookie year and Kevin Stefanski's tenure as head coach of the Cleveland Browns. To fully grasp its implications, one must consider the parallel futures it has opened for player and coach alike. For Shedeur Sanders, the most immediate concern is roster security. Despite his struggles against the Rams, Sanders expressed optimism about his standing, telling reporters he remained confident he will make the Browns' 53-man roster. That confidence, however, belies the harsh reality of NFL roster management. With veterans like Joe Flacco entrenched, Dylan Gabriel firmly in developmental plans as a third-round selection, and Kenny Pickett still in the mix, Sanders risks being the odd man out. If so, his rookie campaign could be defined less by development and more by invisibility. This precarious situation has fueled speculation that the Browns might attempt to stash Sanders on the practice squad. As critics like Skip Bayless argued, such a move would expose him to poaching by other teams, since any franchise that signs a practice squad player must place him on its 53-man roster. Bayless suggested that this could become Sanders' escape route, an opportunity for a quarterback-needy team to seize a talent they still believe was undervalued in the draft. Free him from Cleveland, Bayless implored, framing the Browns as a hostile environment for his growth. In this narrative, the viral controversy might inadvertently serve Sanders by drawing attention from organizations willing to give him a fresh start.
Just something to take people's minds off the disaster that has been the Cleveland Browns. I do like their draft class because I love Shedeur.
The potential destinations for Sanders remain speculative, but the logic is straightforward. Teams with unstable quarterback situations, particularly franchises already facing rebuilding phases, could view Sanders as a low-risk, high-upside acquisition. For them, the viral tape of Sanders confronting Stefanski is not a deterrent, but a signal of competitiveness and fire. His flashes of brilliance in the preseason opener against Carolina still linger as evidence of upside, proof that given proper protection and support, he can thrive. If another team interprets Cleveland's treatment as sabotage or mismanagement, they might be motivated to prove otherwise by offering Sanders meaningful reps. The alternative scenario, however, is less optimistic. If Sanders remains buried on the Browns' depth chart, relegated to scout team duties or inactive lists, the risk of stagnation grows. Quarterback development relies heavily on live reps and exposure to game speed decisions. Without them, even highly touted prospects can fade into irrelevance. Sanders' supporters, including former players like Ryan Clark, emphasize the importance of learning through adversity. Denying him those opportunities, they argue, risks stunting growth permanently. Should that happen, the viral footage of his confrontation with Stefanski may not only define his rookie year, but also become the enduring symbol of a career derailed before it began. For Kevin Stefanski, the consequences are equally complex. Already under pressure in Cleveland after years of fluctuating results, Stefanski must now manage both his team's performance and the perception that he mishandled a high-profile rookie. The Browns' decision to sign Deshaun Watson to a record-setting guaranteed contract remains an albatross, drawing criticism from fans and media alike. Every subsequent quarterback-related decision is therefore scrutinized through a lens of skepticism. The Sanders controversy, framed by some as evidence of stubbornness or insecurity, has only intensified that scrutiny. Stefanski's defenders emphasize his accolade: two-time Coach of the Year, a steadying presence in a franchise long defined by chaos, and a strategist capable of maximizing veteran quarterback. They argue that no amount of viral outrage can overshadow a record of stabilizing a historically unstable franchise. But detractors point to his track record with young quarterbacks, particularly Baker Mayfield, as evidence of a coach who struggles to nurture developing talent. In their view, the Sanders incident is not an aberration but a continuation of a pattern. Young passers placed in impossible situations, then marginalized when they falter. The stakes for Stefanski are heightened by timing. The Browns' ownership, led by Jimmy Haslam, has historically demonstrated impatience with coaches. Even moderate success has not guaranteed stability in Cleveland, where turnover has been constant. If the team falters during the regular season, the Sanders controversy could resurface as part of a broader critique of Stefanski's leadership. Critics would argue that he not only failed to win, but also squandered an opportunity to cultivate a quarterback of the future. In the unforgiving calculus of NFL decision-making, such narratives can tip the scales when ownership evaluates a coach's future.
I'm still convinced Haslam was the only reason they took Shedeur. He just wanted a little publicity splash.
Beyond individual futures, the Sanders-Stefanski saga has broader implications for the league. It has reignited debates about the treatment of young quarterbacks, particularly those drafted later than expected. Coaches evaluate players based on practice performance, scheme fit, and draft capital. The long-term question is whether Sanders can redefine the narrative. If he eventually earns meaningful playing time and performs well, the viral controversy will be reframed as an early trial, a moment of adversity that he overcame. If he languishes on the bench or fades out of the league, the footage will become a cautionary tale of wasted potential and mishandled development. In either case, the significance of that brief exchange on the Browns sideline will endure, not as a preseason footnote, but as a symbol of the crossroads at which both Sanders and Stefanski stand. The broader cultural resonance of the controversy cannot be ignored. In an era where athletes are brands as much as players, Sanders carries a legacy that magnifies every action. His association with Deion Sanders ensures that any perceived slight will draw attention beyond football circles. Critics who argue that teams fear Deion's looming influence only amplify the sense that Shedeur's career is not judged solely on his merits. For Stefanski, this means every decision involving Sanders carries weight far beyond typical roster management. He is not merely coaching a rookie quarterback, he's navigating the expectations of a legend's son in the glare of public scrutiny.
And the fact that why would they sabotage an NFL Legends player? I think that's part of it too. People do feel that Deion Sanders' connection to Shedeur plays a part in how his children have been treated.
Ultimately, the Sanders-Stefanski saga is less about one preseason game and more about the dynamics of modern sports culture. It illustrates how viral moments can reshape careers, how perception can overshadow performance, and how legacy can complicate evaluation. For Sanders, the path forward requires resilience, patience, and perhaps a change of scenery. For Stefanski, survival depends on winning games and convincing both ownership and the public that his decisions are rooted in football logic rather than personal bias. For the Browns, the controversy is yet another chapter in a franchise history defined by turbulence, raising questions about whether stability is truly attainable. Well, that's it for this video, but don't go anywhere because we've got plenty more heat for you. Just tap any of the cards on your screen right now and keep it locked.